The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, this is a sound check. Just make sure you set your speaker levels correctly. We'll start very shortly. Thank you. Okay, so that seemed to work satisfactorily. So let's get going. Hopefully you've all received your PDF document of the ArchiCAD 17 upgrade training document. If you haven't got it, things may seem a little bit strange, but we can provide it to you after the fact. We won't have questions throughout the session. We'll wait till the end and potentially just email those as a group to everyone that attended so everyone can see the questions and answers. So without further ado, my name is Mark Horrocks from Graphisoft New Zealand. We'll be joined later by Jonny Breen, another Graphisoft employee, and he'll take you through some of the other parts of the upgrade training. So page 4. The first thing you'll probably do if you haven't already done it is install ArchiCAD 17. Installing ArchiCAD 17 following the steps in the Getting Started guide that you would have received with your upgrade pack should sort you out. The download and install of CADimage tools is very similar to how it was in version 16. Just go to the website, download the tools, run the installer, type next, and you should be okay. We did have some issues with Mac and Java and upgrading the key plugs. But if you do go to the upgrade website and you are still having problems, there is a new activation tool available for download from the upgrade website. So that should sort you out with your installation. Following the steps in the Getting Started guide should sort you out with ArchiCAD, CADimage tools, CADimage work environment, key plugs, etc. The next thing you probably want to do is migrate a file through from 16 to 17. Library migration works seamlessly from 16 to 17 with the proviso, of course, that you use the Consolidate Libraries button. Consolidate Libraries works from 13 to 16 automatically. Once again, hitting the Consolidate button. They do have migration libraries for 10, 11 and 12 that are installed with ArchiCAD 17, but they require a link process. When migrating from 16 to 17, libraries and objects should follow through seamlessly using the Consolidate button, but because building materials are a brand new attribute in ArchiCAD 17 that didn't exist in ArchiCAD 16, these get made on the fly, and they can be made, and because they get made on the fly, they are relatively messy. Now I'm going to run you through a couple of upgrade processes, a basic upgrade and a full upgrade. We'll go through the building material cleanup process. I think this year, more so than previously, the question within your organization as to whether we upgrade, whether we migrate or not, is a pretty big one. Migrating anywhere from 10 through to 16 was pretty simple. Just open up it in a new file, hit the consolidate button, and it go away. But now that we've got this new super attribute called building materials, things get slightly more complicated. But I'll run you through that process in a moment. Just a few more housekeeping things. If you are opening up older files, ArchiCAD 17 can open all the way back to 8.1. And if you want to open up further than that, we can supply, or Graphisoft.com can supply some file converter software that allows you to open all the way back to 4.1. If you are following along in your book, we're on page 5, so the web link for that is on the middle of page 5, http www.graphisoft.com/downloads/fileconverter.html. On that website there's a bunch of FAQs to do with code meter, operating system, library parts, and simply running the process. If you do want extra help on that, go to ArchiCAD 17 Help pull-down menu, go to the ArchiCAD 17 Reference Guide, and in there's a migration section which gives you comprehensive details on how to migrate from whatever version you're coming from. So that's migration there. If you were lucky enough to own EcoDesigner back in the day, migrating those files through to 17 simply works. All you need to do is, if you haven't already, replace zones, because energy evaluation works in conjunction with the zone tool, which it didn't in version 15. If you're migrating energy evaluation from 16 to 17, it just migrates seamlessly, and then you get all the new features of energy evaluation in version 17. A little note on operating systems here in the middle of page 6. ArchiCAD 17 is 64-bit only and cannot be installed on 32-bit operating systems. It also will not install on XP64 and is not tested, therefore difficult to support on Vista 64. So the supported operating systems for Windows, for PCs, excuse me, is Windows 8 64 and Windows 7 64. Please be careful. You can buy Windows 7 and Windows 8 32-bit, so make sure if you are purchasing new hardware that you make sure that your operating system is the 64-bit version. On the Mac platform, supported operating systems are OS X 10.7 and 10.8. 10.6 is capable of running ArchiCAD 17, but once again it's not tested, so it's difficult to support. But please note, if you are running 10.6, ArchiCAD 17 is the last version of ArchiCAD that will run on it, so it won't install any new versions on 10.6. So upgrading CADimage tools elements. So if you're opening up files with CADimage tools in them from 16 to 17, all CADimage tools migrate straight through. Once again, with the proviso that you load the correct libraries. This has been a support load on the team throughout any upgrade process, because if the new version of ArchiCAD, or the new version of CADimage tools, is referencing the old version library, the tools don't function as desired. But what the guys have done in development have actually made a link between the CADimage add-on and the CADimage library, so they check to see whether they're the same version, and a warning will pop up saying that you need to consolidate your libraries. So hopefully that will no longer be a problem for us. Now 16 to 17, as I said, is relatively straightforward. If you're opening up older versions, there is a whole bunch of steps there on pages 6, 7 as to what to do. Things like rapid details back in ArchiCAD 11 changed into detail elements, so an upgrade is required there. In ArchiCAD 13, cabinets got a tickle up, so there's an upgrade there. In version 14, accessories changed into CADimage coverings, and once again an upgrade is required. In most cases, it requires the download of the upgrade goodie, which is available from the CADimage.com website, and that should sort you out there. Now, Doors and Windows has had some upgrades over its lifetime. So version 10 requires an upgrade, version 12 requires you to upgrade the schedules. In version 16 there has been some changes to the way wall skins interact with the jam, so with the way they wrap into the jam. So there's a new little dialogue that the developers have done there to give you the opportunity to upgrade them now or upgrade them later. Now I'll run you through that in a moment. The last thing I want to talk about there on page 7 is the fact that ArchiCAD Select objects are not provided as a single download file. They're now all provided via the BIM component portal, and I'll cover that in a moment. So without further ado, let's show you how we do a basic upgrade. So I'm going to start ArchiCAD 17. And I'm going to open up a version 16 file. So I've got here an ArchiCAD 16 project. Now the first thing you'll get, or may not get, but a library loading report. My library loading report has popped up with some missing objects. Now I'm not really too concerned about the library loading report at the moment. It could all be sorted out by loading the correct libraries. Now you can get straight to the library manager with the button on the bottom left of the library loading report, or you can go File, Libraries and Objects, Library Manager. Either way, we want to open up the library manager. The problem here is pretty obvious. We're in ArchiCAD 17, but we have opened with a linked library that says ArchiCAD Library 16. So this is where the CADimage tools cause problems, and even ArchiCAD's own objects cause problems. So this yellow button here, which has been around for a while now, is our Consolidate Libraries button. We simply click on it, hit Consolidate, and what that does is it removes ArchiCAD Library 16. And as you can see here, it replaces it with the ArchiCAD 16 migration library, and then it adds the current version library, which is ArchiCAD Library 17. So that sorted out all our ArchiCAD objects, and it's also sorted out all our CADimage tools, because the CADimage tools, of course, are installed inside ArchiCAD Library 17, but we've still got some missing objects. If I expand my missing objects there, I can see that I've got freestanding and flue and OS B&W loudspeaker. Now I know that these objects are from my ArchiCAD Select library. Now you might not even have these missing within your organization, depending on where you store your ArchiCAD Select library. If you store your ArchiCAD Select library on a share drive, on a server drive, because the file path is still the same, these objects will just keep linking back to that server library. If, however, you have installed the ArchiCAD Select library where we recommend, which is inside ArchiCAD Library 16, then these objects will be missing as they are on my computer. Now, there's a few things that we can do to fix these missing objects. Now, I'll flip back to ArchiCAD 16 here to show you this. Now, back in ArchiCAD 16, pre-migration, you can actually go to the library manager. And in this instance, what I've had to do is I've had to remove the ArchiCAD Select library from inside ArchiCAD Library 16, and I've just loaded it separately. You'll notice I've got no missing library parts. But if I select ArchiCAD Library 16, I can choose this button at the right here, which is my Embed Placed Objects. So what that's going to do is within ArchiCAD 16, it's going to look through ArchiCAD Select library, grab all the objects that have been placed with it, and embed them into ArchiCAD 16. So if I hit that there, goes and embeds all the libraries, and then it removes ArchiCAD Select Library 16, and here we can see the embedded objects sitting up in here. And now I've got no missing parts. The great thing about embedding them prior to migration is that it now no longer looks for the library, and there'll be no missing library parts. So that's one way we can upgrade our objects. If I jump back to ArchiCAD 17, The other option within ArchiCAD 17, if I haven't embedded them, is simply to add the library. So same as we did in version 16, just click the big Add button at the top here, and then go and search for your ArchiCAD Select library, which in my case is stored on my desktop. Now I'm not going to do that because I'm going to show you our preferred method. Now our preferred method is to actually upgrade these objects with parts from the new parts from the BIM components website. If you are following along, excuse me, we are on page 11 now. So what we've done is we've had to rename all the objects. We couldn't upload them with their old names. We had to give them all new GUIDs. So they're all actually brand new objects. So when we're looking at the old library parts, they won't have the same name as the new library parts. But the old library part in some form will be in the description of the new object. So if we were searching for example, fire or flue or loudspeaker or antenna, we would find the new part on the BIM component website. So I'm going to run you through the process of upgrading this TV antenna O2 CAD image. So I'm going to OK this, and I'm going to cancel out of my library loading report. To upgrade a BIM component object, you open up the object tool in the toolbox, and I'm just simply going to search at the top of the screen here for an object, and I'm going to search for antenna. So typing into the search box, it's going to go off now and search the local libraries and then of course the BIM components libraries. We can see here it's found 3 objects on BIM components, nothing locally because I haven't got my local library loaded. The CADimage objects are, have a C, the CADimage C logo in the background. Now you can see some of these BIM component objects have a key icon. This means that they are select only content, so only New Zealand select customers can see them. The other ones without the key are just available free to everyone. So my TV antenna O2 CAD image, which was a satellite dish, has been replaced with this new object here. So if I select that object, I have the ability to download and embed. And if I click download and embed, it zips off the BIM components portal and it downloads and embeds that object. Now we have noticed that with the how can I say this in a nice way, with the slow internet connections of some areas in New Zealand, we are getting timeouts on the download. The download is only allowing a 30-second maximum download. If you are finding that you're getting download errors because of slow internet connections, just give the guys at support a call and they'll show you how to make the timeout longer. Now the great thing that's happened here is the old object and all its parameters have been pushed into the new object. So if you've changed the shape of the satellite dish, you've changed its surface materials, you've changed its pins or its line weights, they would all have come through. And the other thing that's really great about this is it's downloaded and embedded it. So it's embedded this into the ArchiCAD file so that when we upgrade this to the next version, we won't have to do this process anymore. So I'll click OK at this point. That object has been upgraded. If I go back to my library manager, we can see now that my TV antenna O2 CAD image is not missing, but it's now instead in my embedded library. So placing things in the embedded library is the workflow that we suggest going forward. It may even be a solution for PLAs, but I'll leave that to you as an organization to work through. So we're not going to upgrade the rest of those, but you can see the process. So when you migrate a project from 16 to 17, simply open it in version 17, hit the consolidate button, and then find your libraries with one of those 3 steps. And those 3 steps were embed them in 16 before migrating, add them in 17, hitting the add button at the top of the library manager, or actually upgrading them to the new version 17 objects using the object tool and BIM components. So those are your three processes. So I'll OK on that. So as we stand here, this is what I would consider to be a basic upgrade. We've still got ArchiCAD 16 bits and pieces kicking around in the background. We've got ArchiCAD 16 layers and pen sets and line types and all that sort of stuff. But before we move into the main upgrade, I just want to show you this CADimage door and window enhancement that the developers have done. If I select one of these CADimage windows and go into its settings, we get this new dialog pops up. Now it knows that this library part didn't start its life in version 17, so it's saying this is an old library part, and it's giving you the opportunity right now to upgrade now or upgrade later. Now, as I said, the main change in ArchiCAD 17 was the way the way doors and windows place, and we'll cover that later, and B, the way multi-skin walls wrap to door and window jambs. Now we notice a lot of New Zealanders don't use multi-skin walls. We use single skin walls, or even single skin walls with maybe some plasterboard linings, but we don't wrap the linings, and then we come along later with our CADimage coverings to add our weatherboards or our brick or whatever it is that's on the outside of our building. So you may find that it doesn't make any difference to you to upgrade the CADimage doors and windows because they were working fine. So if you just simply want to go into the door or window and change a window configuration from awning to top hung or whatever it is, you can hit upgrade later. Upgrade later changes the dialog back to what you were familiar with ArchiCAD 16. We can come to set out glazing, and then we can choose to change our window into whatever we want. So this is a very similar dialog to we had in ArchiCAD 16. OK that, and the window updates. The problem is, if it is a problem, if you want to go back into that window, once again you are showing the same dialog. Now if you're doing a lot of window manipulation, you may choose to upgrade now. Now hitting the upgrade now button automatically change the dialog to ArchiCAD 17, and then we can so automatically change the object to ArchiCAD 17 and also upgrades the dialog to ArchiCAD 17. Now the main change here, or the only change, is in window wall openings. It's all the stuff in here to do with wall wrapping, so composite skin wall wrapping. So if you are a user of multi-skin composite walls, and you find that when you upgrade a project from 16 to 17 things start looking a bit wrong, upgrade the doors and windows and then come into the wall opening here and adjust the settings in here. The good thing is now, if I click OK and then go back into the window settings, I don't see the upgrade now, upgrade later button. So if you just simply want to upgrade all the windows and doors at once, just select all your windows in a 3D view, hit upgrade now, and then select all your doors and go upgrade now, and you never have to see that dialog again. The great thing about what's going on here is the developers are giving you the choice onto whether or not to upgrade, and you don't have to upgrade all elements at once, which is previously what we've done. So thinking about how the end users use their products is a really great thing. Similarly with the select objects now provided to you from the BIM component web portal, the ability for the new object to have script in its code that tells the old object to change itself into the new object is a huge leap forward in CADimage object migration. So the developers are really thinking about how the tools are being used from an end user point of view. So, excuse me, the next thing we want to talk about is full upgrade. Now, as I said, we've still got all the ArchiCAD 16 stuff kicking around in the background. We've changed the libraries, so they're ArchiCAD 17 libraries, but all the attributes are still ArchiCAD 16. So we may want to change these. So the way we do that is using the attribute manager. If you're following along, we're on page 13. So if we open up the attribute manager, options, element attributes, attribute manager, this lists all the attributes in our project, all the layers and layer combos and pens and lines and fills. So if I just click on pen sets, you can clearly see here that the pen sets that are loaded in my project are all the ArchiCAD 16 pen sets. And I want to upgrade these to ArchiCAD 17 because I want to use the new building materials. It's really easy to do. Over on the right hand side here, I click on the open function, and then I go and search for an ArchiCAD 17 file that has all the information in it that I want to grab. Now I'm going to grab the New Zealand template, the ArchiCAD 17 template that's shipped on the DVD, but this could just as easily be your Office template, or it could be a PLM file that you're happy with the information that's in it. So I'm going to select this TPL file here, and now you can see on the right hand side here I've got all the ArchiCAD 17 information. Now I'm going to shift select all those, and I'm going to choose overwrite. If you choose append, it'll just add them to the list. So instead of having 8 pen sets, you'll have 16. And then you'll have a situation where you've got to go back through your project and migrate them individually from the 16 pens to the 17 pens. But if I overwrite, it's going to overwrite attribute 1 for attribute 1, attribute 2 for attribute 2. So that means if we have a quick look down the bottom here in the bottom right in our quick options, we can see that the pen set that this particular view is using is GA 1 to 50 NZE 16. If I hit overwrite, it will instantly change that to 17. So here we go. Overwrite, they've all changed to 17s on the left hand side. Apply, modify, OK, and now if we have a look in our quick options, that's updated to version 17. So that means I don't have to go through each one of my views in my view map and change them from 16 to 17s. It also means I don't have to go to all the drawings that are already placed on my layouts and change them from 16 to 17. It does it automatically because I've changed attribute for attribute. Now if you've also changed things, you've got some more line types, you've got some more materials, you've got some different layers, you can also use the attribute manager to bring those new elements through into ArchiCAD 17. We're not going to do that, but that's a relatively straightforward process by using the attribute manager, just the same as we use pen sets. Now, as I said, the big thing in ArchiCAD 17 is the introduction of the super attribute called building materials. Now, because they don't exist in 16, it makes them up in 17. And what it does is it looks at all the composites and complex profiles you've used in ArchiCAD 16, and they've all been created using standard ArchiCAD 16 fills. So on the way through, it migrates those into building materials, so it just gets the name and all the properties of the fill that was in ArchiCAD 16 and pushes that as a building material in ArchiCAD 17. So let's have a look at how that works. So options, element attributes, building materials. So here we've got the new building material dialog, and I won't steal too much thunder from Jonny because he's going to go through this later on. But basically this is a building element. It's plywood, or it's concrete, or it's underfloor insulation. It's an element, it's a material, it's something that we use in our 3D model, and it's a physical thing. We haven't done this before in ArchiCAD. What we were doing in ArchiCAD 16, say we wanted to place a wall, we would just go to the wall tool, and then we'd go, well, I want this wall to be brick, so we'd go and choose a brick fill. Or I want it to be concrete, so we'd go and choose a concrete fill. But in ArchiCAD 17, we still go to the wall tool to place a wall, but now we choose the element. So we go wall glass, or wall plywood, or wall precast concrete, or wall concrete block. And within that concrete block building material, it has a 2D representation, it has 2D pens, it has a 3D surface finish, and then it also has all the physical properties if you get into energy evaluation. But Jonny's going to cover building materials in much more depth later on, but basically what we're looking at here on the left hand side is all my fills from ArchiCAD 16 just dumped into ArchiCAD 17. It adds this 8-digit code on the end, which can get confusing, so I'll show you how to get rid of that. But also you'll notice that they're not named as they would you would expect as a building material. Things like 100%, 25% airspace background fill. You can't go to placemakers and ask for 12 sheets of background fill. So this is the issue when you migrate a project from 16 to 17. We've got building materials, but they're incorrectly named. You could go through the process of renaming them all to the right things, but on a migrated project, this could take some time, could take half an hour to an hour, excuse me, depending on how accurate you want to be. But there's no reason why you can't. The other issue that we can see here is we've got duplicates. We've got a whole bunch of background fills there, a whole bunch of cut stones, gypsums. Now the reason we've got duplicates is because if you were using the standard New Zealand template in ArchiCAD 16 and you were placing some walls, you would have used the ext stud 90 for your exterior walls and int stud 90 for your interior walls. Now both those walls use a composite that has the same fill of background fill, which is why you can see you've got duplicate background fills. Now it's really easy to remove those duplicates if you see fit. Now I'm going to do this right now. So if I scroll to the bottom of this list here, you can see they've got a whole bunch of structural concretes here. Now they could have come from beam details, so my foundation details, could come from some walls, could come from anywhere. So I'm going to select them all and leave one at the bottom unselected, and I'm going to hit the delete key. New for ArchiCAD 17, the delete key doesn't actually delete. It actually pops up a dialog box, at which point you can choose, do I want to delete, or do I want to delete and replace? Now this is what we want to do. So click delete, well, click delete and replace, and then from the pull-out here, I'll choose the last structural concrete. You notice I can't choose all the ones I've chosen to delete, but I can choose the last one there. Hit replace, it consolidates all those into one, and for me to finish that off, I come up to where it says structural concrete here, and I'll just delete that 8-9-digit code. I will continue doing this process for all the rest of the building materials, so I was left with just one for each. Now this process may not be a useful process for you because you may want the building materials all to be separated out. You may want to differentiate between your background fill of your exterior wall, and you want to rename that to exterior wall. And you may want to differentiate between your background fill for interior wall, so you'll rename the building material interior walls. But in this case, we just want to consolidate them all into one. To repeat that process for all the rest might take another 10-15 minutes, but we won't do that today, and we'll click OK. Now the reason we are consolidating those building materials is because we want to easily be able to edit their priority. So to do that, I'm going to go into a section CC and show you what that's all about. So section CC here, this is a standard ArchiCAD 16 section. There's no 2D overlay. So what we've got in here is complex profiles, composites, and CADimage coverings. I'm going to turn on the ArchiCAD 17 Smarts now. So I go Options, Project Preferences, Construction Elements. Page 16 for those following along. So at the bottom here we see Legacy Options. And the one that's ticked says Use Legacy Intersection Methods as in ArchiCAD 16 and before. Now I'm going to untick that. And before I click OK, I just want you to look at what's going to happen here to my eaves area. So clicking OK, you notice that my wall has pushed through my roof. Now this is to do with the priority junctions. We've just turned on the priority, and now the building material priority of my roof is lower than the building material priority of my wall. Now this is a new feature of ArchiCAD 17 that it automatically cleans up junctions. But because we've migrated this project from 16 to 17, these priorities may be wrong. So it's really easy to fix. The first thing we need to do is find out what building materials went into creating these elements. So if I hover over that roof, you can see there that the structure is using a building material called background fill, big long number ending in 1765. Now if I had consolidated all my background fills, I would just have one background fill there with no long number. But as you can see, that background fill there may want it to be renamed to timber roof. So background fill there, I can do the same thing to the wall. The structure here this time says X stud 90. Now I know that's one of my composites, so that's not telling me exactly what the building material is. But new for ArchiCAD 17, if I right click, I can choose to edit the selected composite straight from the right click menu. Now this is a huge advance for those of you that are using composites. If you cast your mind back to how you did it in 16, you would have gone into options, element attributes, composites, you would have searched for your composite. You could have alt-clicked on it back in the section, which should have highlighted it in the composite menu, and then you go and change it and so on and so forth. But it's so much easier. Just simply right-click, edit selected composite. This is a fairly simple composite, and this one here is made up of a single skin, and that single skin is called foreground fill, big long number ending in 3405. So those are my two building materials that I need to deal with. Now I'm going to come back to the composite structure dialog in a minute, but for now we know what our two building materials are. This building material called foreground fill simply needs a lower priority. So as with most things in ArchiCAD, if I select it and then go into its settings, into its properties, the things that created it will be highlighted. So let's do that. So I select the wall, options, element attributes, building materials, and as it's only a single skin, only foreground fill is selected. But if that was a multi-skin wall, all the skins that went into it will all be selected in the building material list. Now I want to deal with priorities at this stage, so I'm going to click on the priority button at the top there, and it lists all the elements by priority. Lowest at the top, highest at the bottom, i.e. things that are going to get chopped at the top and things that are going to do the chopping at the bottom. Now if I have a look back at my foreground fill, and 2 up from that is my background fill ending in 1765. You can see, if you look at the priority bars on the right there, that foreground fill has got a longer bar than background fill. Now this means it has a higher priority, therefore the wall is chopping the roof. Now if you're not into looking at bars and you want real numbers, come over to the right here and you can see that the intersection priority is 683. And if I click on background fill, the intersection priority of that is 559. Now you've got 999 priorities you can use in ArchiCAD 17, so a lot more than you had with composite skin priorities in 16. Now I can just simply change this number here. I can make this number higher or lower, but what I can do as well is if I come back to foreground fill, I can left click and hold and I can just drag that up the list, drag it up above background fill, and it changes the priority from 683 to 435. So it means I've lowered the priority of that wall. So I click OK, and now that wall has been, because the priority of the wall has been lowered, the roof chops it out and we're all good. So if you do an upgrade from 16 to 17, you turn on the ArchiCAD 17 Smarts by going Options, Project Preferences, Construction, and then untick the tick box, you will notice that in your sections and 3D views some elements may be in the wrong order, and you simply go into the building material list and drag them around to put them into the correct order. Now this junction here is particularly unimpressive to look at the wow factor of the building material cleanup. So I'm going to come down to my ground floor here. So select my ground floor and I'm going to change its structure. So new for ArchiCAD 17, the structure is now up here in geometry and positioning, whereas before it was hidden down in floor plan and section and the cut surfaces. So if I'm going to change it from floor concrete 100, I simply click on it up here, and I'm going to change it to the one below here, concrete 100 plus 50 insulation. So as you can see, this is much more than just insulation. I've got an insulation skin, some DPC, some sand blinding, and some hardcore fill. Notice as well that the two black nodes that signify the edge of the slab are actually underneath the edge beam, but they're not actually. If I select that edge beam and delete it, it goes right to the end. If I undelete that, the beam cuts them out. Now the beam, we haven't used display order, we hadn't bring to front or send to back. This beam is actually chopping out the insulation and the sand blinding and the hardcore fill. Now the reason it's doing that is because the building material of the beam has a higher priority than the insulation and the sand blinding and the hardcore fill. So it chops it out. Now as I said, this is not display order, this is not 2D fills. So this is actually chopped out the geometry correctly. So if we got a volume of, how much underfloor insulation do I have, it's actually giving me the correct volumes. If I change the width of that perimeter beam, it changes the volume of insulation, sand blinding, and hardcore fill. So this is proper BIM. If you do use ArchiCAD's powerful scheduling to schedule out quantities, it's doing it correctly. So this is great for those that use ArchiCAD's powerful scheduling. If you're not into scheduling, at least we can look at that section and go, well, that's done it for me. I don't have to use 2D overlays. I don't have to use extra lines and fills. So what they're trying to do in ArchiCAD 17 is make the sections more detailed without you doing any extra work. And this is all through the building material priority cleanup. Now, building materials are the main focus, or one of the main focuses of this upgrade training, and we're going to keep coming back to them over again. But I'm going to leave them right now, and we're going to have a look at the new composite structure dialog. So I'm going to select one of my walls upstairs there, right-click, hit Edit, Select Composite, and we're into the composite structures dialog. Those of you following along, page 18 there, if you can remember back to ArchiCAD 16, we had a whole bunch of extra stuff at the bottom of this composite structures dialog. It was all the things to do with skin pattern, cut fill pens, background pens, priorities, component type. Now we still have to think about all that sort of stuff, but it's now all handled back, or most of it's all handled back in the building material. So the composite structure dialog becomes a very clean place, a very simple place for us to create new composites or modify existing ones. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to add an interior 10mm skin of plasterboard. So really simple, just hit the Insert Skin button there, it adds a new skin, click on the building material, brings up my building material list, and I can choose the building material. So this is where it makes a lot of sense to call your building material what it actually is. And remember that this is a hybrid 16 to 17 project. In the New Zealand template for version 17, we have named all the building materials correctly. So in this case here, I'm just going to pick one of these gypsum ones. As we move our way across the line here, we can come to our structure type. And this is not new, but core, finish, another. Now, a lot of little things going along here are making it more obvious for us to use composites in our standard process. One of the reasons I would use composites, and especially using an internal plasterboard, if I wanted to show in my 1 to 20 bathroom and kitchens my plasterboard, and I wanted to dimension to my plasterboard so that I made sure that my bath fitted and my shower fitted and my kitchen fitted, I would set it to finish, and in my large detailed drawings I would set the structure to entire model. But say back in my general arrangement drawings, my 1 to 50s and my 1 to 100s, I don't want that lining on because it confuses the drawings, it makes them a bit complicated, and I don't want a dimension to the linings, I just want a dimension to the 90mm framing. I'd turn it off and set my structure display to core only. So this gives us a lot of ability to produce much more accurate drawings and much more relevant drawings without any extra effort. We just set it to finish, let ArchiCAD sort it out. So I'm going to do that, I'm going to set that to finish. Last thing I'm going to do is set the skin to 10mm thick. Image on the right changes here, click OK, and now all my sections, all my section updates. Now I didn't mention it earlier, but one of the other main functions of ArchiCAD 17 is its ability to do what's called background processing. Now this is the first architectural software available that offers background processing. All of you have at least a dual core machine, but most of us have quad cores or hyper-threaded quad cores, so we've got 8 or 16 cores. So what happens is one of the cores is potentially getting used by the operating system, another core is getting used by another piece of software, another core is getting used by ArchiCAD. So there's a whole bunch of cores just kicking around in the background not doing anything. So what ArchiCAD does is it now uses those cores to regenerate views in the background. So the fact that I've just updated the skin and it's updated in the section, if I zip straight back to my floor plan, I don't have to wait for that to update because it's already done. I don't have to wait for any other sections to update because it's already done, and it's done all this in a background process. Now this building is very, very small, and a huge difference to the 160,000 square meter Russian tower block that we did in the ArchiCAD 17 launch, which actually showed the cores working overtime when we did a change like this. But for a very basic building like this, you just don't even notice it happening. But background processing is very powerful. It's in its infancy in ArchiCAD 17, so it's only going to get bigger, better, and stronger. And this is one of the things that we just couldn't do with 32-bit computers. So the fact that we're all now on 64-bit platform, of course the Mac's been on 64-bit for a few years now, but because we're all now on 64-bit platform, all this background processing and all the complex solid element operations that building material cleanup is doing just wouldn't be able to happen on 32-bit machines. They just couldn't handle the amount of calculations that are going on. So it's a really great thing we're all on 64-bit. So background processing really should speed up your navigation around ArchiCAD 17. So that was page 18. I'm just trying to follow along the book, so if you are following along, we're now on page 19. Another function of ArchiCAD 17 was the ability for us to link elements to stories. We can link walls, columns, and zones to the story above. This is great. If we change the floor-to-floor height of a building, no longer do we have to then go back and change all our walls and columns. They will automatically link to the story above. So I haven't done that yet, so let's show you how it currently doesn't work. So if I go to my story settings, and I'll change the height to next to the ground floor to something higher, to 3600. So this is currently what we're used to. You lift the story heights up and the walls don't connect to them. So let's go and fix this. Now, I'm not sure how many of you already use Find and Select, but it's an incredibly powerful tool. Find and Select allows us to select elements within ArchiCAD, multiple elements really, really easily. If I had already selected an element on the screen and I use the Suck Up Properties button here, it injects all the settings of that particular element, and then using the criteria buttons on the left here, I can customize the criteria so I can pick up all those elements or just certain elements. So it's very, very powerful. Now I don't know which walls I want at this stage, so I'm just going to use it the old-fashioned way. So element type is wall, and then choose to add a criteria. It adds pen by default, which is not what I want, so click on that. You'll notice that the list of criteria is much larger than it was in ArchiCAD 16, so you can get much more sophisticated about what you're trying to pick up. I'm going to choose height, and I'm going to set my height to 450, which I know is the height of my old walls. Hit the plus key there, and it goes and finds those 6 walls. If I now open up the settings of those walls, a new dialog has appeared here under Geometry and Positioning, which is called Wall Top. It's not linked because it knows that the project has come from ArchiCAD 16, so it hasn't automatically linked everything. In version 17 in the template, we do automatically link these. But if I click on Not Linked there, I can choose what I want to link it to. And I just want to link it to the story above, so Home +1 is what I want. Now the dialog changes and all the dimensions change, but what actually the actual geometry of the 3D wall hasn't changed. You can see the height here is still set to 2450, and it's done a big set down from the story above. Now this could be quite useful if we were doing internal partitions and we wanted the partitions to go from this floor to the floor above, but we wanted them to set down the height of the ceiling space, so 600 or 800. So if we change the floor-to-floor height, that cavity stayed the same. But we don't want to do that in this case, so I'm going to set that back to 0. The dialog changes to 3600, and the image on the left changes as well. So we're just going to click OK. I'm now going to jump back to my section CC, and those walls will jump up automatically. So now if I change the floor-to-floor height, it doesn't matter, everything just changes with it. So that's great. If I do change it, if I go back to my story settings, say I drop it back down to, I don't know, just 3 meters. Just jumps. Now you will notice here that there is some conflict here with my CADimage coverings. This is because it hasn't actually been told that the wall has changed. So it's a very simple process. We're hoping to add a button to the CADimage coverings that fixes this in the future, but we simply select the covering, open its settings, change nothing, go OK, and it heals itself. So we're just needing an update coverings button that should appear shortly. So that's fine. ArchiCAD elements now linked to the stories, so changing stories in the early design phase or even in the late construction phase, we can still sort those things out very quickly with the link to stories function. So very, very powerful stuff. If I do actually go and have a look at that mid-floor junction, and I'm going to select this wall, it's showing me here that the wall is going all the way up to the floor above, because I can see these 2 nodes at the top here. But the wall isn't showing, and that's because the building material priority of the joists and the timber flooring have a higher priority than the wall and the wall lining. And it's not done a bring to front or send to back or whatever. It's actually chopped it out. So if I was once again using my scheduling ability in ArchiCAD to say what is the area of the interior wall, so I can calculate how much paint I need or how much wallpaper I need, it's giving me the exact square meters. If I change the floor-to-floor height and go back into it, of course that changes. If I change the floor sandwich thickness and rerun the schedule, once again it's real BIM stuff. So if you are using scheduling, this is a great new function in ArchiCAD 17 that it allows you to schedule things quite accurately. It also means we don't really have to think too much about the floor-to-floor, about the height of our floor sandwich. Just draw the walls from floor to floor and let ArchiCAD sort out the wall joist junctions. New functions as well in connecting to wall tops. If we go to door and window, we've now got the ability here to set the windows and doors to link to the wall top. We're trying to think why we would do this. Doors probably not so much, but with windows, if you're doing some high-level windows, some clear story windows, link them to the wall top. So as the floor-to-floor heights moves and the wall tops move as well, those clear story windows move with them. There could be many other uses for it, but you can now link doors and windows to the wall top. So that's new for version 17. We're moving on to page 21, core-based reference lines. Now for this I'm going to discard this project that started life in 16, and I'm actually going to open up a version 17 project. So here we have our version 17 project, and I just zoom in on that mid-floor junction again. Now these composites here are the standard ones that ship with ArchiCAD 17. Now if I select the mid-floor, now see how we've got this nice little notch out of the mid-floor here, and then the wall actually gets chopped out here. Now this is all simply to do with building materials. So the building material priority of the battens and is lower than the wall, therefore the wall chops it out. The priority of the ceiling lining and the wall lining are the same, so they join. The priority of the joists and the flooring are higher than the wall, therefore it chops it out. So it's giving us the ability to create these very nice general arrangement section views which need very little extra input. For us to do this in ArchiCAD 16, we probably would have used 2 slabs, one for the floor and one for the ceiling, but we can get away with just a single element in version 17 with the correct priorities. And as I said, this is standard ArchiCAD 17 we're looking at now, so hopefully we've got the priorities all sorted out and working well. Another thing we probably could get away with here is not adding any extra 2D information into our 3D, into our section view. Now, going around the country doing the training, this became quite an interesting conversation about, well, what about our top plates and bottom plates and nogs and dwangs and all that kind of stuff and insulation. And so, well, do we actually need to add this stuff? I mean, councils ask, they expect it, but it's not in their required information on the view. We could simply point to that wall and go 90mm H3.2 studs at 600 centres with nogs at 800 R3.2 insulation within. That should be suffice. Now, I know that another thing what we're trying to do is create drawings that convey what we're trying to achieve. We want drawings that are clear for the building inspector, for the builder. So of course we can add all that information. Now we can do it via modeling, or we can do it via 2D overlays. If you want to do it via modeling, you could use complex profiles, and into a complex wall profile you could add your top plates and your bottom plates and your nogs and all your insulation. If you didn't want to use that, you could use CADimage wall frame tool, which automatically places all your wall frames to 3604. And if you don't want to do it in a modeled fashion, you could go back to using the very cool CADimage detail element tool, which has wall frames and floor framing and rafters and all that kind of 2D overlay. But if you want to keep it 3D, you might want to think about using complex profiles, or CADimage wall frames, and it keeps it all modeled. At the end of the day, we're trying to keep everything modeled as much as possible. So choose your weapon in that case. Do I want to do it in 3D, or do I want to do it with 2D overlays? So we digress a little bit there, but I'm just trying to show you the power of building materials and how it can automatically clean up our junctions for us. But what we're here for is core-based reference lines. I've got my slab selected still. At the top of the screen here, I've got my old reference plane locations, top of slab, bottom of slab. Got two new ones here, top of core and bottom of core. Now, this could be quite good. Say, for example, you're doing a multi-story project, concrete floors. Set the reference plane to the top of your structural level. Set that structural level to your structure level in your project. The engineer comes back and tells us what topping thickness it should be. Just go back into your composite, upgrade the topping thickness from whatever it was to whatever it is, and it all changes without your structural levels changing. There could be there's definitely other ways we can use that with slabs. Choosing a wall, same sort of thing. If I go up to the top of the screen, we've got our old scenario there, outside, center, and inside face of the wall. Now I've got a new one, core outside, core center, core inside. And as I mentioned before, ArchiCAD 17 is giving us all these little snippets to help us use composites more in our general flow. The ability here to set the reference line of a wall to the outside of the core means if we are using composites to create our exterior walls, we're not using CADimage covering. Say we're doing some sort of precast building, and on the outside of that precast building we've got some external cladding setup, sandwich, bit of insulation, bit of, I don't know, aluminium cladding. If we set the reference line up to the core outside, and if that insulation and cladding changes, the tilt panel, the precast panel, doesn't change its location. Just the insulation and the cladding, just the outside cladding changes. So once again, it's giving us the ability to use composites in a much easier way by giving us these little details here. Now, not that this is necessarily new, but if you change the core settings using the info box, the reference plane stays where it is and the wall moves around. Now this is standard with ArchiCAD 16. If you wanted the wall to stay where it is and the reference line to move around, we could do that back in 16 by going to the Design Wall Extras menu. It's moved in version 17. It's now in the Edit, Reference Line and Plane portion. And here we can see Modify Wall Reference Line, Invert Wall Direction. These are two functions we're familiar with in 16. And then you've got the new one here, Modify Slab Reference Plane. If I click on the Modify Wall Reference Line there, the dialog is similar to what you remember in 16, except we've got this new core stuff here. Now if I change the reference line location in this dialog, the wall stays where it is and the reference line moves around. So that's the difference. If I do it in this dialog, the wall stays where it is. If I use the dialog at the top of the screen, the reference line stays where it is and the wall jumps around. So that's not new. They've just moved it to a different location, but I thought I'd mention that because I'm hoping that we're all going to start using composites much more. Next thing here on page 22 is CBI classification. So Graphisoft gave us a call and said, do you have a consistent naming convention in New Zealand for elements? And I was like, well, not really, but we do have this thing called CBI, and they said, well, do you want us to add that into ArchiCAD 17? And of course I said yes. So now we can tag elements with their CBI code directly in ArchiCAD 17. Now it's pretty easy to do this, so what I'll do is I'll jump into a 3D view and I'll show you how this works. So I'm going to select all my walls, and I'm going to their settings, and right down the bottom here in tags and categories, and right down the bottom of that I have this text here that says manage IFC properties. If I click on that, change it into a button, click on it again, and it brings up my IFC properties. Now I'm not very interested in this at the moment. What I want to look at is this button down the bottom that says apply predefined rule. If I click on that, it opens up my rules, and I can choose at the top of the list here cores or CBI or Omni class or Uni class, but I want to choose CBI. Once I've changed to CBI, it changes to the standard CBI structure, and I suppose one of the reasons we would be doing this is CBI is the numbering convention, what we're familiar with in master spec, for those of you that use master spec. So anyway, this is structure here, so expand that out. It's timber, so expand out 38. It's timber framing, so expand out 382, and finish with 382 timber framing. Hit apply and OK, and now if I have a look down the bottom here, all my walls have now been tagged with the CBI classification of 3821 timber framing. Now, as we've been going through the country doing upgrade training, it has come to our attention, of course, that this is a bit broad brushstroke. Obviously, that wall is made up with a lot of different elements. There's plasterboard, and there's insulation, and there's all sorts of stuff. So it's not purely a timber framing 3821 thing. But if you were to go through your project and do all your windows and doors and roofs and slabs and interior walls were different to your exterior walls, you can start getting at least the main classification, the main section headings of your master spec. We are looking at asking Graphisoft if they can attach the CBI classification to the building material, which would make it much more useful. But Jonny in the second half is going to look through the improvements in Keynotes, which now allow you to attach Keynotes to building materials, which is a very nice new function of the Keynote tool, which may alleviate this to a certain extent. Now, we will be looking for feedback on whether or not you think the CBI classification is relevant to your workflow. But if you were going to use it, you can also schedule this stuff out. So I'm going to OK that, which tags all those walls with those codes. If I go to my wall list here, I can actually add that to the scheme. So at the moment here I've just got length of wall, surface area of wall, and maximum height of the wall. So I go into my scheme settings. I'll just bunch that up there. if I hit the Add IFC Properties button here, I can go through and choose my CBI field here, and I can add that, and it adds all my CBI information. The only one I'm concerned about is the item reference at this stage, so I can just remove that other stuff. Click OK, and now my CBI code is visible, and of course I can export that to Excel or do whatever I want to it. So the idea of adding a CBI code is quite nice. It's probably more suited to a BIM element naming convention, and I know that there are organisations around New Zealand that are working on the BIM handbook. The BIM handbook will have some guidelines on how to name 3D BIM elements. As soon as that BIM handbook sees the light of day, I'm sure we'll add that BIM classification into ArchiCAD so that that can be done automatically as well. So it's really cool though that CBI is in there. Now CBI is a New Zealand specific thing, so you won't find these functions in the Australian version or the American version or the German version. So it's really nice to see ArchiCAD HQ actually customizing this in the code for the New Zealand version. So very, very powerful stuff. So let's move on. Page 25. Easily editable cutting planes. Now we've always had cutting plane ability in ArchiCAD, but it was always in that very complicated editing plane dialog box, very small images, very hard to show where our cutting planes were. Changed it a lot for ArchiCAD 17. So I'm going to open up my perspective view here. Got this new cutting plane button at the top of the screen here. It's just to the left of your 3D of your energy evaluation button. So you click on it, you get these little scissors appearing around your edges of your screen. You just click on them and you can drag your mouse, which shows your cutting plane. As the name says, easily editable cutting planes, so we can easily drag these out. Once you finish, you click, then you can drag another plane from somewhere else, and you can just keep going until you show the area of your project that you're most interested in. When you're finished, you can hit the finalize button, and it finalizes your location of your cutting planes, and then you can save that as a view, put it on an output sheet, do whatever you want with it. Now there's some other things that we can do here. So from that pull down menu next to the 3D cutaway, we can create custom cutting planes, which are cutting planes on an angle. We can delete the cutting planes, we can toggle the cutting planes on and off by using the show cutting planes button, and we can also filter, open up our filter and cutting planes dialog. In here, very similar to what it was in ArchiCAD 16, excuse me, we can see that our cut surface display at the moment is showing with Paint 04, so we can see it's all black, all our cut surfaces are black. But now with ArchiCAD 17 building materials, the cut surface can also show, the surface can also show in a cut view. So if I turn on this here, click OK, my cut surfaces are now showing with their true building material. So if I look at my underfloor slab here, I've got the concrete wrapping around, the blue underfloor insulation, I can see my DPC, my sand blinding and my hardcore fill. On my deck I can see my timber deck and my zone for my joists. Now it's not a new function of course, but 3D documents are incredibly powerful. If I wanted to actually output this drawing here and I wanted to put some dimensions on it, I want to put some notes on it, 3D documents where it's at. So just right click and we can go 3D document. It creates a new 3D document that I can now add dimensions and text and notes to. They're all live, just as live as a section and elevation. So if my perimeter beams change or my floor construction change, this 3D view will automatically update. So 3D documents are incredibly powerful. Once again, they're not new, but I just thought I'd show you because 3D documents in conjunction with the cutting plane, if you've got a really complicated junction, a beam junction that you want to show, go to your 3D view, grab your cutting planes. You can drag your cutting planes from 6 sides of your building, north, south, east and west, top and bottom, so you can zoom right in on that complex beam junction. right click, 3D document, then you can add text and dimensions to it, and then you can export that as a view to your engineer, or as a view to your builder, or as a view to your building inspector for clarity. So if you don't know about 3D documents yet, please start using them in conjunction with 3D cutaways. Very, very powerful stuff. But as I said, it's not new. I'm going to go back to my floor plan. This is new, however. The cutting plane is now showing on my floor plan. So I can drag that cutting plane along, and where my building is grayed out is where it's cutting, and where it's solid is where it's not. But what we thought was quite cool about this is we could set that cutting plane to align with a section. And then we've always got white space on a section view. Why not put a 3D of the section in that white space? Better still, grab that section 3D, save it as a 3D document, and add some additional text and notation to it. So we believe that now that we're really easily using 3D cutaways, we can start using our 3D views much more freely on our output documentation. We're always modeling in 3D. Why not use that 3D data to clarify to whomever what you're trying to do? So I think it's really, really powerful. So get into that for sure. Okay, page 27 now, surface recognition in 3D. Now, ArchiCAD for a while now has been giving us a lot of functions to allow us to work better in the 3D window. Back in version 15, I believe it was, we got 3D editing planes. We also got 3D guidelines, so we could accurately place things using guidelines in 3D. Version 16 gave us horizontal surface recognition, so we could place objects in 3D. It also gave us surface recognition of multi-plane roofs, which made it really easy for us to place skylights. In version 17, we've got we've got surface recognition of any surface in 3D. So I'm just going to open up a new view here. Internal perspective. Now this view is being saved with two cutaways, one on the left and one coming from the right. You can save as many cutaways as you want. So what we're going to do here is we're going to place some objects around our project. So I'm going to go to the object tool. In this instance, I'm going to use the search. Now this is the way I use ArchiCAD's object tool now. I don't go back to this view here and go into my linked libraries and go to ArchiCAD 17 and search from object library and I just come straight up to the search box and search for what I'm looking for. Now I'm going to place a bunch of clocks around here. So I just do a search for clock. Instantly it finds the clock in my loaded libraries, but then very quickly it finds all the other BIM components that are scattered around in the BIM component portal. These ones here I thought were quite interesting. A clock collection, says over here highly parametric clocks for decoration, analog, digital, modern, antique. You've got grandfather clocks and stuff like that. So BIM components, incredibly powerful. You may not even know that you want an object that you're looking for. So if you always use the search up there, very quickly you may find that there is an object that already exists that is better suited to your project than the object you thought you were going to place. Remember, simply hit the download and embed button. It embeds that object into your local library, and you never have to worry about it upgrading from version to version. Now we're not going to do that, but I just thought I'd refresh the importance of BIM components. We're just going to place this clock 17 here. Now as I move my cursor over the project, you can see that it is snapping to the surfaces of my walls. It's also, if I look at my ceiling here, it snaps to my ceiling, snaps to my mesh, to the cut edge of my mesh, to the cut edge of my building. So 3D surface recognition, very powerful in 17. Now I'm going to place some clocks. You can see that it's snapping to the surface there. Now placing clocks, I am sort of mucking about with you a little bit, but you can just as easily be placing a beam from one surface to another, or placing any construction element on that surface. Now if we were to do this in version 16, we would go into the object tool, we would set the home story, we would set the elevation, and then we would place it. But wherever I'm clicking on the screen is where it's placing that clock. I can also click upstairs. Now the cool thing about placing it upstairs is it's changed its home story to upstairs. So if these two clocks I've placed upstairs were set to display on home story only, of course they won't show downstairs. They'll only show upstairs. Now this is quite different to how we would have placed objects in 3D in 16. We would have had to set their home story prior to placement. So this is really cool. ArchiCAD becoming relatively aware of its 3D environment. I'm going to place some chairs at this point now. So once again, come up to the top here, type in chair. So I'm just going to choose a chair, design a chair 04. Looks good enough to me. Now this is not new. We had this ability to place things in version 16 like this, but if I was to place some elements upstairs, this is different because now that has a home story of upstairs. Now what I wanted to show you in this exercise here was 3D story snapping. So if I select one of these elements and activate the drag command, I've got these little blue tags that appear in the vertical axis, and if I come up to it you can see that my cursor changes to now say 2 first floor and 3 roof. If I click on those I can accurately move this chair from the ground floor to the first floor, which of course is changing its home story. So now it's now home story to the ground floor, to the first floor, excuse me. A lot of reasons we thought this would be quite good. Multi-story buildings which have a bunch of sun shading devices, select them, copy multiple from story to story to story. There can be many uses for this, floor joists, double T's, anything like that. So very powerful 3D story snapping. A long-awaited function is the ability to curve beams. We've always had workarounds for curving rectangular beams. We could use a piece of slab, a piece of wall, whatever it was, but now we can do it natively with the beam tool. So I'm going to select a beam here, and you can see now that I've got two new functions here, curve, edge, and tangent. So choosing curve, simply curving a beam. Yeah, cool. So curving beams, you may think, whatever, I always had a workaround for that, but it's a native beam now. So if you're exporting this to your consultants, your collaborators, it is now coming up as a beam, not a wall, so you don't have to do any mucking about. But also we thought very nice, because of course the beam tool uses complex profiles, you can apply a shape to a curved surface now, natively in ArchiCAD, which is great. Bunch of different ways we thought that could be used. Say you've got a kidney-shaped swimming pool, you wanted to add a edge tile to it. Create the shape of your edge tile in the complex profiles. Go to the beam tool, use that complex profile, and simply space click. Use your magic wand to click on the edge of the swimming pool, and it places that edge capping tile to your project. It is limited to the horizontal plane, so you can't curve it in the vertical plane. So anywhere where you want to extrude something along a horizontal surface, could be a gutter around a curved portion of your project, could be a driveway or a footpath on a flat surface. Remember, it has to be flat. Just set up the profile, do your wiggly spline shape on your plan, and the driveway will follow that. If you do want to do it in an inclined surface, you can stamp the mesh, you can use CADimage extrusion tool. There's still a lot of other options. But I think curving a beam is well and good, but using the curved technology in the beam tool and applying it to a complex profile is very powerful. Just while we've got that view open, a lot of customers through the process were saying, you know, yes, you want to work more in 3D. A lot of the functions we had in 2D, of course, work in 3D. One of the things that came up was, can I extend these beams to touch my curved beam? Of course you can do it in 2D, but you can use all the functions in 2D in 3D. So I can just simply use the adjust tool, and I can, oops, simply he says, and it doesn't work. and you can adjust things in 3D. So 3D may be becoming a much more natural place to work in ArchiCAD 17. So see how you go with that. I'm just going to undo that because we're going to come back to this view later on. So page 29, if you are following along, priority cleanup part 2. Now building elements have automatic priority, we've shown you that, but we can clean up elements in more ways. The main priority we have in ArchiCAD 17 is the same one we had in ArchiCAD 16. It's layer intersections. So if you're not familiar with it, this is the layer intersection number running down here. By default, it's all set to 1. Now, with it all set to 1, all elements try and interact with each other. So beams try and meld into columns, try and meld into slabs and all that kind of stuff. If you don't want something to try and join, then you need to create a new layer for it and change that layer, the intersection layer, to something else. A classic case would have been historically before the renovation tool came out, would be to get your demo walls not intersecting with your new or existing. So create a new layer called walls demo, set the intersection layer to 2, then they never clean up. There can still be ways of using those currently in ArchiCAD, so that is still your main connection priority. Then you've got building materials, of course, which we talked about, and then new for ArchiCAD 17 is this thing called junction order, which is very powerful. So got some beams here because we use the beam tool to do our foundations. I've got 3 beams that are intersecting at the same point here. Now ArchiCAD in its infinite wisdom has intersected the wrong beams. So it's intersected this big fat one here and one of my skinny ones. Now I want the 2 skinny ones to intersect, so if I choose them, open up the settings, inside model, I've got this new thing called junction order. Now I can up the junction order with the up arrow here, click OK, and now those 2 intersect and as if the other one doesn't exist. So that's really cool for beams. Of course, in ArchiCAD 16, we could have grabbed this big beam here and changed its layer priority to put it on a new layer called fat beams, set the layer priority to 2, and that wouldn't have set it, it wouldn't have joined. I could have grabbed the beam, moved it back 0.5 millimeter, all those kind of little tricks. We don't have to worry about those tricks now because we've got junction order in ArchiCAD 17. Junction order works with beams and walls, so if you've got a bunch of walls coming in at complex junction, you can use junction order with the wall tool, so that's great. Page 30, if you've got there, floor plan based 3D documents. Now I showed you 3D documents before, just before I mean. Now we can do 3D documents with with floor plans. So it's really easy to do. If I go to one of my floor plans, you just right click 3D document and it creates a 3D document. Now once again, a 3D document is just like a section or an elevation. It's live. If I move anything around here, it moves around everywhere. Now this is the good oil here. If I go into the document settings, down the bottom here in model display, you're familiar with all this stuff. How does the view look? Is it shaded? Is it black and white? Does it have sun shadows? All that kind of stuff. But here's the really good stuff here, floor plan projection. So by choosing reflected ceiling plan, you're looking up. By choosing floor plan, you're looking down. And then you can set the cut plane here to whatever you want the chainsaw cut to be in your project. And you can show here how far do you want to look down. Now, there's lots of reasons we thought this would be an absolutely brilliant new function for 17. Say you've got a very complicated ceiling geometry, you've got lots of ins and outs in your ceiling, or you've modeled your light fittings and extracts and smoke detectors and sprinklers, and you want to accurately position those, do a reflected ceiling plan, and then of course, because it's a 3D document, you can add dimensions to it. And because it's live, if you want to move those sprinkler heads around, of course, they move everywhere. Another really good one that we came up with was the ability to show mid-floor framing and the supporting walls beneath. This has always been a relatively complicated scenario. We had extra layers, or you could draw lines, or you could do all sorts of weird and wonderful things. But simply, come into a 3D document, set your cutting plane to somewhere within your modeled floor joist, because of course, not of course, we should all be modeling our joists, I suppose, and then set it to look down so that it sees the tops of the walls beneath. Now, once again, the great thing about it being a live document is if you want to use that 3D document to move your joist, to double your joists up over your load-bearing walls, to move your blocking around, you can do all that kind of stuff in the 3D document. So incredibly powerful stuff. Any feedback from you guys as to where you think this could be used, where it could be very helpful, just send them all through and we'll add them to our huge tip resource. Actually, talking about tips, I'm not sure whether you're all familiar with the tip of the day add-on. So when you start ArchiCAD at the start of every day, it automatically pops you up the latest tip of the day. If you don't know how to get that, just go to CADimage.com, go to Downloads, go to Goodies, and it's one of the top ones there, ArchiCAD 17 tip of the day. Yeah, it's a very, very nice little thing, little tip of the day every day when you start ArchiCAD. So yeah, send us through any reasons that you think the floor plan-based 3D document can be used. So moving on, page 31, smarter layer management. Similar new function within the layer dialog to we had when we were cleaning up our building materials. We can clean up our layers and do all sorts of weird and wonderful things in here. I'm going to select a bunch of layers on the right there. I'm going to hit the delete key. New for ArchiCAD 17, a delete doesn't delete anymore, it brings you up a little dialog. Now remember in 16, when you deleted a layer, it deleted all the information off that layer. You can still do that in 17 by choosing this option here, delete elements, but you can also say, yep, I want to delete them, but I want to move all the information onto another layer. Now this is absolutely amazing. Think about collaborating with your consultants. We all know that surveyors must get paid by the amount of layers they put into their projects, 60 layers. So grab all those layers from your surveyor, say delete, but move all the contents onto a new single layer called surveyor's info or structure info or whatever you want. Keeping in mind, of course, that layer manipulation won't work after that, after you've jammed them all onto a single layer, but really nice for cleaning up projects. Grabbing details from the interweb, just grab the detail, merge it into a blank project, use this consolidation tool, grab all the layers that are there, merge them onto a single layer called details, and then copy that into your project. So very, very powerful stuff. Another really interesting thing we thought we could use this for, if you are migrating a project, say from version 12, back in version 12 you would have had potentially you would have had different ways of working, different layer sets, different layer combinations. So as we did earlier, open that version 12 project in version 17, which as we saw brings all the version 12 layers with it. Open up the attribute manager, go and grab the version 17 layers, and then come back here and grab your ArchiCAD 12, say, walls layer, delete it and move its contents onto the ArchiCAD 17 wall layer. Get your ArchiCAD 12 roof layer, move it to the ArchiCAD 17 roof layer. Once you've gone through that process of deleting all the 12 layers and moving all the contents onto the 17 layers, it's as if this project started life in ArchiCAD 17. So it's a very, very good workflow for those CAD managers and BIM model managers that want to make the project seem as if it started life in the new version. Very, very, very powerful stuff. I'm going to cancel out of that because I don't want to delete that stuff. Just before we get out of this dialog, notice down on the bottom right here, we don't have text for lock and unlock and show and hide. We've got these lovely icons. A little bit of a joke as we've been going through the upgrading. Of course, this is the glory feature for upgrading from 16 to 17. Why wouldn't you want icons in your layer settings dialog? But anyway, we digress. Still on page 31, another amazing new function in ArchiCAD 17, the ability to move elements around in your section and elevation. So I've got a view here called Flying Ducks. It was very early in the morning when I made this view. I must have been hallucinating, but I created an object here, a little duck. Standard Kiwi icon there. We want the 3 ducks in the hallway, so we can just drag multiple copies, and we can just drag those 3 ducks. Of course, you can add as many ducks as you want. Now, once again, I'm sort of playing with you a little bit with the ducks, but the ability to do multiple copies in the section or elevation window, we could do that with beams or windows or any objects we want. Think how hard that simple process would have been in ArchiCAD 16. Go to your floor plan, copy a single duck across, go back to your section, move it up, go back to your floor plan, move another duck across, go back to your section, move it up. So very, very good workflow in ArchiCAD 17. What they're trying to do is go work in the view that's most productive for you. Is it a section or elevation? Is it a 3D? Is it a floor plan? Just be in whatever view that makes you most productive doing whatever it is that you're doing currently. There are some limitations to this. They are on page 31. Dragging and dragging multiple, obviously we can do that. Mirror and mirroring a copy for everything except doors and windows. Multiply, of course, for everything. And interestingly, rotate and rotate a copy only for morph, shell, and curtain wall. So I'm not sure why that wasn't put into ArchiCAD 17. Must have been some very tricky coding required. But Jonny will show you in his section there a very powerful tool for actually doing rotating in 3D. And sorry, not rotating in 3D, rotating in section. So that's our new objective tool. Right, so IFC publishing. I usually ask who in the room collaborates three-dimensionally with their consultants using IFC, and the odd hand pops up. If you're not collaborating using IFC, don't freak out too much. It's becoming more popular, but it's still definitely not the norm. 2D, DWGs, and PDFs are still a very consistent workflow. ArchiCAD can obviously handle that stuff very well. But if you are using IFC, Industry Foundation class, to collaborate three-dimensionally, if you're not familiar with it, it just simply means that you can export your 3D model, your 3D architectural model, into any other 3D software that can understand IFC, and then they can do their work inside your model and then send you their work. So structural steel, hydraulics for sprinklers, duct work, and then you can have that steel or duct work inside your architectural model. So very powerful stuff. Now, new for ArchiCAD 17 is the ability to store, to add to your publisher set IFC. So simply choosing in here to use IFC. So if I go and create a new publisher set here, that should already have been made, sorry. And if I drag a view across, I can set this to be IFC. So very nice new workflow for those of you that are using IFC and you are already collaborating. One of the great things about being able to do it in the publisher, which we couldn't in the past, is if you drag a floor plan into your IFC publisher set, and because IFC is 3D only, it acknowledges that that ground floor plan, that you actually want the ground floor 3D data, or the first floor 3D data, or the second floor 3D data. So it's a very, very nice way of allowing you to save out IFCs of floor by floor. So very powerful stuff. Okay, moving right along, door and window placement. Now, door and window placement has changed for ArchiCAD 17. If I select one of these windows here, first thing that we notice is we've got a new placement option or a new anchor point option. We always had center, but now we've got side 1 and side 2. As you go to place your door or window, if you're familiar with the curtain wall tool, you'll notice the sun icon representing the outside, but in fact it actually represents the clicked side. If I move my mouse to the other side, you can see that sun icon moves to the inside. But the process for placing a window in 17 is the same as it was in 16. Click on the outside of the wall and then choose which orientation you want your window to be. Of course, you can click onto the inside. This doesn't change your jam orientation, but simply changes the window opening orientation. But this is set up all on the CADimage object, so don't worry about that too much. Placing of interior doors is similarly different to what it was in 16. So the idea here is to click on the side of the wall that has the hinges on it. Now the reason we do this is because in the door and window schedule we want the door hinges to face us and the door to open towards us. This is how we set up whether it's a left hung door or a right hung door. So if I want this door to open into this little room here, I hover over the side of the wall that I want the hinges on, and then I choose my swing direction. Now of course I can choose the other side, the opposite side to the sun icon, but if I go to my CADimage door and window schedule, that door will now open away from me, therefore the doors that show up on site will probably be hung the wrong way. So that's all we need to do. So click into the room that you're concerned about and then choose whether you are left hung or right hung. Actually I'll get rid of those doors because that'll confuse later. Alright, I'm going to hand over to Jonny, who's going to take you through some of the other new features of ArchiCAD. So I'll hand over to Jonny.
Hello, Jonny here. Okay, we're going to pick up with STL files. This is something that has been requested quite a bit by different users around the world. STL files are the standard format for 3D printers, much like you could safely know that a 2D printer could print a PDF. STL is pretty standard for 3D printers. The idea is if you're actually modeling a building in 3D, you should just be able to hit print and the model making days are over. But there is quite a lot of little things to know about STL files that we have learnt through experimentation, and we figured we'd just give those lessons to you so you don't make our mistakes. The first one is size. 3D printers are still limited in terms of the actual size they can print. So whenever you're printing a model, you've got to be aware that you might not be able to print the whole model in one go. The most evident part of that is the site. If you're trying to print the site, if you print the whole surveyor's mesh, it's going to be too large, you won't be able to print it. So what we've done is we created a site that fits in the exact restrictions of the 3D printer. So while our original site might have been much bigger, we just created one that I know I could fit in the 3D printer. Otherwise, we'd have to print the original site cut up into several pieces. So the size is important. The next is your scale as to what size you're actually going to print it. So it is, if you save it at 1 to 50, that's the size that's going to print. So you just ensure you get your scale right before you do it. So in mine here, I'm printing it at 1 to 50. Now, the complexity that a 3D printer can print is probably the most defining part of the process. If you notice from my view here, the ground floor, a lot of the detail has been removed because the 3D printer can't handle it. It has certain restrictions still, and one of the main ones is the minimum size it can print. That is generally 1 millimeter with a little bit of variance, but if you play at 1 millimeter, you're going to play it pretty safe that your model will be printed. So with that in mind, you can see that the doors and windows are removed because our 40mm aluminium joinery and our 10mm thick glass come down to 0.4 millimeters thick, and the 3D printer will simply refuse to print that. It will just turn out horrible. So much like you would actually make a model in real life, windows are left as just holes and openings, so it just illustrates where they are. The other one that's missing is the weatherboards, because their profile is about 35 millimeters and 0.3 will not print on the printer. And the other issue we experienced was cavities. So the cavity that we had between the weatherboard and the wall, or the roof covering on the roof, meant that the bit that even did try to print wouldn't stick because there was a void, so when it did finally print, it would fall off. So weatherboards too thin to print in the cavity creates some issues as well, so we've excluded those. The only other part that I didn't particularly want to lose was the pergola beams. You'll notice that the beams running from these columns to the building are missing. That is because they're 140 by 45 profile, comes down to 0.45 millimeters thick. Again, it's too thin for the printer. So stuff like that, you would print it so that everything you do print will go out okay, and then it's maybe just a case of cutting up card and sticking on the bits that are quite necessary, because I count those beams as pretty necessary. So that's 3D printing. Now the other one is, if I go through the views, you'll see that I actually print my roof separately, or you can cut it out in a piece of card to save money. 3D printing isn't cheap still. The reason for this is if I printed this room with the roof on, the 3D printer will automatically add in ribs across the room so that I can support the roof while it's printing it. Otherwise it would collapse in for every row it prints. That just means whenever your print's complete, if you look into the windows, you're just going to have all these ribs inside your room. It's not going to be that nice a clean a space. So if you print it without the roof, it prints it exactly as the shape you see, and then you can just stick the roof on top. You can get quite clever if you add little notches in so that the roof can literally click on top like a Lego piece. It also means you can actually go and see into your building. So there's additional software available. It's covered on page 36. These are some of the ones that we were advised by our 3D printers that are quite good. And basically they analyze your STL file for these issues. So they try and find any holes, cavities, or items that are too small that the 3D printer will struggle with, and I can clean it up that bit further. Although all of that can easily be managed via layer management and model view options in ArchiCAD. Just save the view of the part that you need and print it, and you should have no problems. So that's 3D printing. You just do File, Save As, and a new format, which is quite complex, called stereolithography, or just .stl. You can be confident that any 3D printer will be able to print that file. Okay, we're going to go into a bit more detail about building materials. Mark has covered this on and off throughout the training, but now we're actually going to show you how to set up building materials. So we go into Options, Element Attributes, and Building Materials. Now we like to think that we provided 90% of the materials you're going to need while using ArchiCAD. We've looked through the general construction and all of our composites and created building materials appropriate to those. But no doubt you're going to find that you'll need some more. The list that we have made for you is on page 38. So on the left is what the material is, so soil, for example, and then on the right it just tells you what its use would be, so in this case, dirt. Now, no doubt when you go to your office you will find that a certain building material that you need isn't there. I think some of the more obvious examples is the large range of insulation you can get, or the different types of timber walls, whether it's acoustic or fire rated, etc. So what we'll do now is I'll show you how to create a new building material. You'll notice that the duplicate button is no longer there. Much like happens with delete, if you click new, an extra dialog appears, and you've got two options. You can either create a new building material from a clean slate, or you can duplicate whatever one you've selected. So I find the easiest way to create a new building material is select something pretty close and then tweak the materials from there. At least that way you know you're along the same line. So I'm going to create a fire rated timber wall. I'm going to duplicate the timber wall and click OK. So it'll appear in the list, and all of the settings are just going to match the timber wall. So now I'll need to change it. Now for the fill, generally the fill should match the building material name, as in if you use gypsum plasterboard you should use the gypsum fill, or timber should use timber fills. We've slightly broken from convention here in that we know for our plans and sections we want a nice clean fill. We don't want the squiggly wood lines. So just choose the appropriate fill that you'd want to appear in your sections and plans mainly. So I'll stick with foreground fill. Now for the pens, there's 2 new rows of panes added for version 17, and these are the building materials panes. It's this row along the top and this one below it. We couldn't avoid putting these panes in. Building materials requires them, and it just makes editing and pane management a lot easier because there's less panes to manage. Most things can be done via just these 2 panes. So if you move your mouse across, you'll see along the top it says masonry block, tiling, glass, metals. So each of them are quite specific in terms of the building material that they're used for. And for all of them, you have a cut line, which is what's appearing on the outside in your plans and sections, and then your fill pane, depending on what fill you use. So if you're creating new building material, it is better if you stick to these panes. It'll just be a lot easier to manage with just 2 panes instead of 7. But Mark's going to go into the pane set at the end of this webinar and talk about how it's all formatted and get used to it. For this, I'm just going to change to a red fill pane so I can easily identify my fire rated. Your background, again, it can just be set to transparent, or you can choose another color. The next is the surface material. Now, for our timber wall, for example, we've left the surface material to Paint 01. Generally, the surface material should match the building material. For soil, the building material is earth. For tile, the surface is tile, etc. The idea of us keeping it to Paint 01 was so that you don't need to create separate building materials just for the different colored walls you have. So that when you draw a wall, they all appear white, therefore not to confuse the client with any strange colors. But you can override the surfaces on an element level. That means if you draw a wall, you can just select it and change how it's painted rather than having to create a whole new building material. It's just a cleaner way to manage the attributes. If I was to identify my fire rated, I'm just going to set it to red so I can easily see it. And intersection priority mark is covered. For this, if you wanted it to butt through the timber wall, since that is 700, don't be setting this one to 701 because if something happens in the future, you don't have room in between. There's up to 1,000 priorities, so be rather generous. I'll set that one to 715, for example. Therefore, if I need something in between in the future, it can easily be done. And lastly, we can set the physical properties for these material. This is much the same as it was in version 16. Previously, you set it for the fill, but now with building materials, we can actually assign it to the materials we're going to use in construction. There is a material catalog there. Now, finding the building material physical properties for actual materials you're going to use on site can be difficult. The likes of New Zealand suppliers like to just supply an R value rather than how their material is actually made up in terms of its thermal conductivity, its density, and how much heat it can store. So what we've done here is this is based on European standards. All the different types of materials are listed, and it gives you the physical properties of glass, metal, concrete, gypsum, everything you can think of. You only need to worry about this if you're really getting involved into energy evaluation. So if I had my walls, you could go in wood-based panel, and I'll just choose timber 4. And it will set those accordingly. But as I said, if you're not using energy evaluation, which I'll talk briefly about later, you don't need to worry about that. So I'll click OK, and that's that building material created. Now the easiest place to see that would be in my ground floor plan. So I'll open up the wall tool. Now for version 17, they've made it much easier to choose your type of wall. Previously it was hidden within the floor plan and section part of the settings, and it was rather complicated and just not user friendly. So for version 17 we now have 3 simple icons. We have a simple construction mode, a composite, which we've been using today, and then a complex profile. If I choose a simple wall, all you have to do is choose any building material, and then you can set a thickness. So if I choose my timber wall fire rated, I can set any thickness and height. It isn't locked in any dimension. And then you can draw it. Now, as I was saying earlier, rather than having to create a building material for a different colored fire rated wall, if you expand the Model tab, in here you can override the surfaces. So at the minute they're all appearing as red. So if I override the exterior surface, I just click the button to say I want to override this surface, and then you choose the appropriate material, blue in this case. That means the other materials will stick with their building material surface, or you can override them as well. Now, the other option here is composite, which is what Mark has been talking about. Now, for composites, this list changed to the list of composites you've made for your walls, so you can't see the building materials. The building materials are defined in the composite, which was done earlier when the 10mm jib board was added to the 90mm frame. So you can define that in Options, Element Attributes, and Composites. And in here, for each composite, you define the skin, what building material it's made of, and its thickness. Now, the other thing I meant to mention was those pens. These are covered in page 41 of the book, or the PDF you would have been provided, and it's what we've envisioned those 20 sets used for. And then subsequently these have been moved down, but I'll get Mark to cover this at the end of the webinar. The other really useful part, I'll remove those walls, is fills can also be building materials now. So by standard, you're using a drafting fill, which is the fills we're all used to, this set here. But if you click this button, you can choose a cover fill, a cut fill, or a building material. So this list now changes to a building material. It just means when you draw a fill, it's going to have the correct pen and pattern as to a building material already exists. So for example, if I go to section CC, if I wanted to fill in this hardcore, I would choose my building material fill, and I would set to hardcore, I presume. Where is it? I'm going to set it to that. Now, this is really useful for 2D drafting, but one of the main uses for it is in complex profiles. So this slab, or this foundation, is actually a beam made from a complex profile. And much like you could do with a composite, you can select any complex profile, and now you can right click and say Edit Selected Complex Profile. This was rather difficult to do in version 16. You had to capture and open the palette, but that does it all for you now. So if I select this profile, you'll see it's drawn with a fill, and the fill is the building material. So when I actually go and draw that foundation, it is solid concrete, and I could get the volume required, etc. It means you can create any sort of complex profile using any building material you want to be used in wall, roof, beam, and slab. Very, very useful. Now, I'd mentioned energy evaluation. I was asked to write a guide on the new features on version 17, and subsequently I've wrote quite an extensive guide. It goes on for 15 pages. So when we were doing this on the road, we'd skip this section to try and stay within our 3-hour limits. I'm not going to cover it all today. I'm going to overview it, and then later on in a month or two, I'm going to do a few webinars and really focus on getting this perfect for the New Zealand market. So some of the new features is the first thing called thermal blocks. Now, if I go to my 3D view, and we'll F5 that, this icon here is your energy evaluation. So I'll open it to open up the palette. Now, zones have already been placed throughout my building. I've just used the method to automatically snap to the inside of a room. Therefore, they're correct and they touch the surface of the wall, which they're required to do for energy evaluation. Now, previously, you put all the zones in and you would analyze your entire building as one single mass. Now the problem with that is that within your building you could have service sections, circulation or garage space, and they were all analyzed as one model, so it would try and maintain the temperature of those zones as well, which is not exactly what happens in real life. So in version 17 we have this new thing called thermal blocks, and the idea is you can group zones together and you can define what they're going to be used for. So if you did have a bunch of zones that was circulation or garage space, you can assign all the zones to it and not have any temperature restrictions. So to do it, I just create a new thermal block. I will call it NZ residential, and you will add zones to that thermal block. So add zones to thermal block. You can drag and drop, and these are all the zones that currently exist. You got some pretty cool filters here. Show me the unassigned zones. At the minute I haven't assigned anything, so I'll select them all and click OK, and now they are associated with this thermal block. If I had a garage space, I would add a new thermal block. I would call it garage, and I would add the garage zone to it. Now, I don't need that for now. This house hasn't got a garage. Now for each thermal block, they all have an operation profile, which is defined here. Now we've made one for you called residential NZ, and one of the great things with version 17 is these are now editable. So if I go up here and go to my operation profiles, you can set how the building is used. So I'm just going to go to residential NZ. So this is the amount of people that is going to be in, which defines the human heat gain, how much hot water it's going to use, and humidity load as well in terms of laundry. So if you actually went and got your clients' bills and usage, you could set this up perfectly for them. So this is now editable, so you can fully schedule it. So for this one, we've said that they're in there, they wake up in the morning, they all get ready, it's quite busy, and then everyone's out to work and school, and they come back in the evening, and that's when we really want the temperature to be constrained. So that's when energy evaluation will kick in. We've also got lighting, equipment, and the occupancy as well. We've all adjusted this to be more in line with New Zealand standards, so it's a lot more accurate now. The other one that is now covered is model-based irradiation studies. It sounds rather complex, but what it does basically is it analyzes the amount of sun that hits each window. It just means its analysis is much more accurate. It's also worked out based on the model. So if there was a tree in the way, it would know when the leaves fall off and when the sun is going to be behind the tree, therefore less sun is going to hit it. It gets quite accurate. And lastly is building systems. This is something we went on quite a lot about with Graphisoft, in that we couldn't really do a heat pump, because with heat pumps in New Zealand you would input 2 kilowatts and you would get 6 kilowatts out, which didn't work previously. So now, ignoring the word water, you now have a heat pump setting, and you can set it is for heating, the source is the external air, the output can be whatever your heat pump you choose is, and then you have a coefficient of performance. And the idea is if my heat pump only had 800 watts going into it but 5 kilowatts of heating coming out, I could set the coefficient of performance correctly. It just means my results in terms of how much energy I'm going to use is much more accurate. So that's energy evaluation. I'm currently working quite extensively on it, and I will do some webinars in the next month or two. It can be rather complex if you get to the finest details, but it's a really, really useful design tool. If you just whacked some zones throughout your building and did a quick cut of your building without having to set up physical properties, etc., you would get a figure as to how your building performs. Then as you started changing your design, adding eaves or slightly rotating the model, you could do another energy evaluation report and just see if the figures got better or worse than your previously set precedent. It just means you don't need to worry about all those fancy settings. Just see, if I make my eaves bigger, does the building perform better or worse? So that if you did actually go and employ a thermal engineer, you would give him the best possible model you could based on those decisions. So that's energy evaluation. Now on to something a little more fun. BIMx. I'm sure you're all aware of BIMx. It is one of the most exciting things about version 17. It's now free to use for everybody. For BIMx, you need to save it in your 3D view. Now, one of the things I like to point out is wherever you save your BIMx file is where it's going to open. So if you just saved your BIMx file from ArchiCAD and sent it out, you would want to be standing at the front door. So if I was standing here, I wouldn't be actually standing on anything. So you would fall to sea level, which subsequently is 140 meters below me. So before you save your BIMx model, I think it's best to just go in and stand where you'd want your client to be, and then go to File, Save As, and from the Save As type you now choose BIMx. I'll call it SE17 project, and there's a checkbox here. It will automatically fire up BIMx just so you can see the model as to what it's saved. So I'm going to click Save. It doesn't take that long, only about 10-20 seconds. And hopefully this works with the webinar. If it doesn't, just let me know. So this is BIMx. For those who aren't used to it, it's sort of like a gaming environment. It's based on real life rules. So I stand at eye level. I can walk upstairs and through doors, but I can't walk through walls. Much like it is in ArchiCAD's fly-through mode, your mouse is where you look and your arrow keys is where you move. So I can walk forward, and if I look to the right, that's where I'm going to walk up the stairs, and I can walk through the door to come in and see the kitchen. The idea is you could give this file to your customer, and rather than them having to pick up the skill to learn how to read sections and elevations and plans, which is a skill, you could give them a 3D model that they can explore on their own terms. It just means their elevations aren't restricted to one room, and if they wanted to go and look around the corner, they can. Really, really useful function. Now, there's a lot of keys that I quite like. It's more than just explore. You can get some pretty good information about this. One of them is I for information. So if I hit I, you'll see a little crosshairs appears in the middle of the screen. The idea is if I hover over anything, you see a white box appears around it, and if I click, it tells me the information about that particular building element. This is BIM. So I can see the column size, its profile, what layer it's on, etc. So if you're using this on a... Damn. Alright, so BIMx doesn't work on a webinar. That's unfortunate. Okay. Not to worry. I will give you an idea of how it works in this so you can get an idea of how it appears. But in BIMx, the customer would be able to just walk around much like I'm doing here. And it's a much easier way to walk around because they will stick at eye level, they'll be able to walk around and explore the rooms. Now, with the different keys, if they wanted the information about the kitchen or even the appliances within it, you can specify that. One of the other advantages is the M button for measure. So the client can hit M and measure between any two surfaces, much like we can do in ArchiCAD. So just measure from there to there. It just means they're not phoning you up and asking for a dimension that's missing in the plan. There is lots of documentation online, and there is lots of extra short keys like outlines or sunshine. There's even a rendering option to make it appear more real life. Now, BIMx has been used quite powerfully by people who was early adopters because it was created in version 15, and they've been sussing it out for a few years now. So when you're in BIMx, you can save the file again, or you can share it to a portal. Now the saved file, this particular model here, is really, really small in terms of a BIMx file size. It's only 3 megabytes. So it's easily emailable to any client, and they can just open it directly from an email. And the other option is to sharing it. It's basically like cloud storage. You share it online, and you can give a link out to your client, and that can be password protected. The advantage of the portal is that if you did have a catalog of buildings, if you wanted all your past projects, open them and save them, you could then have a portfolio of BIMx models that potential clients could explore. One of the things we thought would be rather clever is if you go and place some 3D text. I'll show you now. If you place some 3D text on your building and write your company name, you can put that in the front of your building so that people know what they're exploring. So yeah, BIMx, play around with it. Unfortunately, it's not working with a webinar because it takes over my screen and the webinar is happening behind it. Just a PC limitation. But it's a really, really useful format. It's quite secure and it can be open on any device. So I'm using it on a PC here. It can be used on a Mac, no problem. But even better, it can be used on portable tablets and phones. So Android and iOS is fully supported and the BIMx viewers are free. So that when you send a client a file, they would go and get the appropriate app. The idea is you don't need to ask your client what computer or tablet they have. You can just send them a single file and they would get the appropriate viewer. This can be found in the App Store or Google Play on Android or on the Graphisoft website. But there is a link provided when you save the file. It's just called gbXML, so that when they double click it, they can automatically be brought to the download page for the viewer and they can download that for free. There is a new BIMx that was released yesterday. It literally was only released, so we're just getting to grips with it, and it includes the documentation as well, so that they can browse through the A1 or A3 sheets from the 3D model. And it's all pretty new and amazing stuff, so we're just getting a grip to it ourselves, and once we have something solid, we'll show it off and bring it around the offices, I guess. Okay, on to something you can see. The new improved ArchiCAD Help Center. Now, previously, we had this help menu. Now, if you installed Google Chrome, which the majority of New Zealand has, the help didn't work because it didn't support the Java links that it required. So help was pretty useless to us. The other issue was that the help was spread in so many websites. You had this help article, you then had the YouTube channel, the ArchiCAD Wiki, and the ArchiCAD Talk forums. So what Graphisoft have done is they've made one website that will work on any browser, and it brings together all of that information so you can find it much easier. And they've also added more help links throughout ArchiCAD. So if you right click anything, there's usually an option there that says, what's this? If you click it, it first tries to go to your computer, but then once it learns that you have an internet connection, it reverts to the online help center. I do have an internet connection, I believe, so it's going to do it now. Now when it goes to the help center, it's not only searching your help menu that you have on your computer, it's searching all the different websites, so you're giving as much articles as possible about it. Now whatever you've asked, what's this, it's going to give you everything about it. So if you ever want to know everything about a wall, there's all the different articles. Now, this is the search tool that will be a savior for most people. No matter what you want to learn about, if you just type it in here, it will tell you. Building materials is one of the newer things in 17, so it may be something you look up, so I'm going to search for it. One thing I like to say is, if on the support folder, if you call myself for the team and ask us a question that we don't know off the top of our heads, generally we come in here and type it, and we'll find the appropriate article and read it out. So if there is something you'd like to know, definitely go to the Help Center, look it up. If it's not there, give us a call. Let's go and see some of the results here. These are the help articles that were previously in the help menu, so they're quite descriptive with lots of screenshots and a real tutorial on how to do anything. Then we have other results. So this is the YouTube channel where it shows you all how to do it via video. A lot of people learn via 2-minute YouTube channels. It's quite useful. So there's lots of videos and all the different things you can do with building materials. You can ask it to load more. It just gives you the top results. And then below that we have the ArchiCAD Talk forum. So this is where people have previously asked questions. So a question that you might have on your head, somebody else might have already asked it, and the question and answer session, which people are just having a discussion, is already there. So it just saves you from looking in 4 different websites on your help menu for this information. Help Center is pretty amazing. Everything's up there and it will get improved, but this is the new go-to place for ArchiCAD. Okay, next we have the CADimage tools. You should already have these. The process is still the same. If you're on the CADimage website, you're going to log in and then go to My CADimage and Downloads. Let's just log in. So these are all the 17 tools. I'll talk about some of these new ones that you might not recognize later. So again, just download Windows or Mac. The installer is based off last year's one. It has some additional improvements that it detects if it's failed. Previously it would always say it passed. So yeah, the process is covered in the Unleash Your Creative Mind book that was supplied with the ArchiCAD 17 disc. Now previously we got our select objects as an LCF library. Mark briefly discussed this earlier. But the idea now is that they're all available via BIM components. So rather than loading a library of 500 or 5,000 parts for the potential use of 3 of them, you now just search for what you want. Chair, for example, since it's right there. And it's going to give you a much bigger selection of options so that you only get the one that you need from a bigger choice. So it first searches on your computer, and then it will continue searching online and should fire up a lot more results. It has a lot of advantages. Your load up time is going to be much quicker. You're going to have more selection. So, and the chairs will belong to the project file, so you won't never have to worry about linked libraries for these fancy parts. They just belong to the project. So just continue searching online. Gives us all the previews. This is one that Mark made earlier. I was rather proud of. So that's BIM components. You may need to register if you aren't already registered for it. And we've just covered that in page 68. You basically go on to the BIM components website, register with your details, and you will have activation code which is entered within ArchiCAD. Now, the work environment. With the download of the tools, there is a CADimage work environment that is automatically installed as part of it. It isn't activated, and it's up to yourselves whether you want to use it or not. I'm just going to quickly show you what it does. The first thing is it inserts the CADimage tools into your toolbox. So we have the polyster, the railing, cabinet, electrical, detail elements, revision. So those tools aren't there in the standard ArchiCAD, but the CADimage work environment automatically inserts them in. And the other thing it does is slightly reorganize this info bar along the top. And this is most evident with the window tool. This being the element ID of the window. Previously this was way off to the side, somewhere around here. And we thought it was a bit too far out of the way. So we brought it right back, top and center, so that you can quickly change it on the fly. Select any window, and you can just change it nice and easy without having to open the settings. So that's the only 2 things it changes within your work environment. All your custom menus, palettes, short keys stay the same. It just adds the tools in there and makes this info box a little bit easier to use with some better organization. You can do it, apply it by going to Options, Work Environment, and Work Environment. And there's the CADimage profile there. Just double click, apply, OK, and it just inserts the tools. Now, I'd like to talk a bit about the tools. So what the CADimage team have been doing while ArchiCAD have been improving 17. Now, for a long time they've been doing a lot of bug fixes. So if you ever encounter a problem, you let us know. We inform the developers, we show the issue, and then we find a possible solution. And it goes through a whole testing process, and then we release an update. And that's been happening for quite a while now. But we did give the developers a little bit of free rein before version 17 came out, and it was basically free rein to go improve a tool and make it a better experience to use. And one of the ones that's been vastly improved is Keynotes. Now, I know some of you already use Keynotes, and some may not have heard of it before. So I'm just going to show how it worked, and then I'll highlight all of the improvements that has happened for version 17 to it. Makes it super tool. I love it. To open it up, you of course go to the CADimage menu, Keynotes, and we have the Keynotes palette. And this is what existed around for version 16. You simply double click the note and you could place it. It just saved us from having to select the label tool, place it, type it in, and then type the same note a lot of times. You just choose from the list you want, so in this case a timber wall, double click it, and now I can place it. Really, really efficient. The idea is you'd set the note up how you want it to appear in terms of the text, the font, and what you want it to appear. Bystander only shows the key, and the idea is that it's going to schedule all the notes for us, which I will quickly show. So if I tick short description as well, it's going to show me both those. So when I click another note, the new standards to show me the key and the short description. It just means you can go through your sections and details and very quickly go around and label your documents. It's going to take a 10-hour workload into 1 hour. Now, one of the big advantages we've done in version 17 is a new palette called the Added Keynote palette. So I'm just going to open that and show everyone who's previously used Keynotes the thing they've been waiting for and you didn't even know it. So this is the Added Keynote palette. Now, what this does is tell us all of the information about a keynote. One of the limitations was that you could only see the key and the first word or two depending on how big you had the palette. Nobody would ever. Real estate is quite expensive on your screen, so you kept the palette rather small. But the idea now is if I go and click a note and tell everything about it, what category it belongs to, the key, its short description, long description, and specification reference if you've added one. And you can add it and add notes on the fly, so that if you didn't even have an Office database set up, you could simply just start adding notes. So 3.01.02, timber walls, I'll just put in the fire rated one I added earlier, and I'll click add the note. And it gets added to my database now. And it means I can just double click it anywhere, add it, and it's just a lot easier to use. Now, I'm pretty sure Mark would have said something about how we believe ArchiCAD has caught up with Keynotes. With building materials, we can now associate Keynotes to different building materials. That just means we can automatically label them, just letting the Keynote tool do its work. So I want to do it for these walls. I'll go to Options, where all the attributes are, and Attribute Keynotes is right there. Nice and easy. Now you can associate Keynotes to lots of different attributes, building materials, composites, fills, and surfaces, etc. I'm just going to deal with building materials right now because it's probably one of the most effective to use. For our walls, they use timber wall and gypsum plasterboard. So I'm going to change this to timber wall, and then I'm going to choose an appropriate keynote and associate it to that building material. So that would be my 301 timber wall. So I'll add that. And I can continue doing this process, so I'm just going to go to gypsum plasterboard. I'm going to associate something from my interior folder, 10mm gypboard lining, and add that as well. If you imagine you set up your template, you could have this done quite extensively, and your labeling process is going to become much more automatic, and it's going to be easier and better quality. So now, currently, I'm placing independent single keynote labels. So I click a label, I place it, and it just sits there independently. One of the other modes is element keynote label. And what this does is it looks at whatever element you've selected and tells you whatever notes are appropriate for it based on what I've just done. So I'm going to choose element keynote label. Now, I haven't got anything selected, so I'm just going to select this wall here. It looks at it and it sees what building materials are in this wall, and it tells me the appropriate notes that are there. Now you can single click a note and place it. You can click a folder, or you can click Alt and place it manually. But even better now is we've added this button here, attach labels to selected elements, and it will automatically add the label, so it saves you from even having to add the label, never mind type the text. So I'll just click that. It notes that labels are already there, so I'm going to remove them and just add my new ones. And there's the appropriate labels done. If you just imagine doing that throughout your plan, sections, and details, it's going to be a lot quicker to use. Now, how it appears is up to you. At the minute, it's using a single label per note, but that's just determined here. Single keynote label. If I wanted one label with all the notes to appear within it, I'd set the mode, and I'd say attach the label. Again, remove the existing. I get one label with all the appropriate notes and the text filled in. Get this one out of the way. Now, one of the big advantages of this added keynote palette is that you can actually edit the notes. So while I added one earlier, you can add or edit. So for our timber walls, if I wanted to be more specific and I wanted to say 90mm timber walls, I would go in that and I would update this note. So that's updated my database. Now, if you imagine you'd place that note throughout 50 different views, you would now spend the next hour going through the views, finding where you've added that note and change it. It's most evident if you change supplier or you change a certain product. In this case, I've just changed the wall. So this button here, update placed labels, if I just click it, you can either update the current view only, which is going to look at every label that's currently on your screen and update it if there's an update available. You can choose the views it updates, or one of the handiest functions is entire project. So I'm going to choose that and click OK. And it goes and scans my entire project, every section, elevation, detail for anywhere that that label has been placed, because I've added it, and then it updates the labels. It's a lot of time saved. Now, one thing that isn't covered in the book is scheduling, which I just like to show if you aren't aware of it. It's done on the master template, so you place an object that is the schedule object. So I'll just search Keynote. We place it on the master only layer. I'm just going to place it right there. Now, if I go to my ground floor plan, you can see that notes are scattered throughout my building. If I use keys only, nobody has an idea of what those actually mean. So with Keynotes, you can now tell it to create schedules based on the drawing. So I'm going to go to Keynotes, and you have two modes. You either have a schedule per layout mode or a single schedule mode. Now, schedule per layout mode looks at only the notes that are on that particular layout and schedules those. Or you can choose a single schedule mode, which looks at all the notes placed throughout your project, so that you could put a database of notes on an A3 sheet and give that out with your set of drawings. So whatever modes you prefer, I'm going to keep it in that one. I'm going to create/update schedule. Okay. It analyzes the drawing, finds the notes, and gives me the key, short description, and long description, all organized within their category. Really, really useful tool. If you haven't seen it before, it may be pretty amazing. So that's Keynotes. I really, really like the new improvements. I think it should be standard, and it's obviously a big hole in ArchiCAD, so we fulfilled that. On to something a little different. Now, in January time, CADimage Group bought another company called Encina, which is based in the UK. And we bought it for the developers that were part of that team. They were very, very good computer developers. Their products were notoriously stable, and they're very smart in terms of how they've done it, because it can work for multiple programs, not only ArchiCAD. So we wanted them on our team to make our tools better, and that's already happening. So with some of the tools, these new developers are leaning in and seeing where potential pitfalls is. So we're spotting bugs before they'll ever happen, and our tools are going to just become faster, better, more stable. But one of the advantages of buying their company was we subsequently got the tools that they've previously developed. It was just an added bonus. And one of them is called Objective. Now, Objective is based off a framing program, but I think it'd be much easier if I show you how it works. So I have a view here called Rotate Lamps. And you can see these halogen recessed lamps are in my slanted ceiling. With Objective, I can go to Objective, Tools, and Rotate. And I can rotate them to line up with the roof. Now, with ArchiCAD, the only way you can do that currently is convert it to a morph, and then it will not have any settings. It will just be a dumb object that it won't be very difficult to use now. But with Objective, it maintains all its settings, so you can still do everything you wanted to do previously. But now it can be edited, it can be rotated in sections, elevations, and plans. So for the likes of these, it's just much easier to select it and rotate them to line up with the roof. And it's still a lamp, not a morph. The other thing I can do is cut objects up. Might seem like a bit of a playful thing. I'll just show you how it works. So I should have a furniture plan right here. And these are the chairs that Mark placed earlier. So I'm going to select one of those chairs. And from the Objective menu, I'm going to Split. And I can cut that chair in half. Just delete the lower half. And then see this in 3D. Now that might all be fun and games, just cutting up an object. But it is a really, really little useful tool. Previously, this worked so that you could rotate cut and move timber pieces to build massive oak frames. So this was a tool very specialized at building timber frames, but a lot of people have seen this tool and what it could do that ArchiCAD has never been able to. And they wanted that functionality, but they didn't need a lot of the fancy scheduling stuff that it can do for timber frames. So the likes of split, rotate, bend, this is all part of Objective, and it just allows you to cut up and move objects just in any view that's most appropriate. It's a useful little tool. One of the other ones he did was called gbXML. Now gbXML is a format, a file format, so the tool is just appropriately called it. Now for this there is only one function, which is place zones. This will automatically look at all the rooms in your house and just place the most appropriate zones. You can tell it what zone to place on what layer, etc. Just saves you from having to place it. But its main functionality is so that you can just go File, Save As, and then from the drop-down list, gbXML, which isn't there. Let's go to my zones. There we go. Well, save as. Mark may not have this installed, but what happens is at the bottom you'll just have a gbXML format, and you can just save that file. It's appropriate if you ever go into some structural or thermal analysis for engineers. They generally require gbXML file. It is quite a popular format for their software, and this is just a way to communicate with them. One of the other places that commonly uses it is Design Navigator. So we've now added that into the help menu just to make it nice and easy for you. So Help Design Navigator, and you can actually bring in gbXML files in Design Navigator so that you could bring your model in and associate the materials to it. And we're trying to work with Design Navigator to fully optimize this, but it's a really useful function. So that's the two tools that they have developed. Now, those are all currently existing ones and they've been out in the market for a long time. But one of the things we did recently was we sent emails out to everybody and we asked who would like to be part of a development process where we can analyze your requirements and build a tool that you need rather than what we think you need. It's just a better way to work. And what we asked people generally was what they hated doing the most in ArchiCAD, what they least looked forward to, what was the most cumbersome, and what took too much time. And the number one answer was subsequently electrical setouts. They just didn't like doing it. The selection of objects was very limited. They were wrongly sized. You had to rotate them in place and then offset them from the wall. Your wiring was done via splines, which didn't update. There was no schedules. There was no 3D representation. So I can understand their frustrations. So we listened to them and we thought, okay, we can make a tool that makes this better. And we have now developed the electrical tool, which came out midway through version 16. And this is our first chance to show you. Now I'm going to go to electrical view components. There is different ways that you can do your electrical setup. There's two main ways that we heard from everybody, and this is whether you show the switches that the electrician has to wire up or just where a wall plate is going to be and what it contains. So what we've done is using model view options, you can choose however you want it to appear. So what I'm in now is the components view, which shows me the individual switches that are part of a circuit. So if I go into bedroom number 2, you'll see that there's 3 switches here, 2 two-ways and an intermediate switch. But if I go to my wall plates view, it just shows me switches here. It's a 3 gang. So however you want it to appear is up to yourself. Now this is all automatic. The idea being if I move my switch, I don't have to snap it to the wall. It will say snap to the wall, and all of the wiring associated to it will update as well. I'm just going to place some in this room here. I just noticed I dragged the wall by accident. I'm going to bring that back up. Now, this room has some lamps placed, but it has no electrical switches. So I'm going to show you how it works, and then you can trial it for yourself and see if it's going to make your life a lot easier. So you have the electrical tool here in the toolbox. Double click it to open. And we have components, which are the 2D parts, and then we have wall plates, which are 3D. So I'm going to do it both ways to show you. I'm just going to choose a switch, click OK, and I'll place a few around the room. Now the great thing is you just have to click near a wall, and it will snap to it and offset itself the correct distance, so it's nice and consistent. It also rotates so that it's facing the wall correctly. It just saves that extra minute you spend dragging, rotating, and resizing. It's really, really useful. The other way of doing it is instead of placing the components, whether it's a switch or a power source, etc., you can actually place wall plates. Now, we listen to lots of customers from around the world, and we've built the tool for them. So there's Europe, New Zealand, UK, and the US. We're just going to deal with New Zealand here. And switches. This is built quite like the HPM standard range, so it is quite like what you're going to install. You can set the materials, but their appearance is how they are. The idea is you can actually see them in 3D. So if I click OK, and I place it near this wall, it places on the wall, it's brought out, and it's given me the electrical symbol, because just a simple box here isn't sufficient enough. You can choose if you want to see it or not. I have it currently turned off. Now to wire something up, you just choose the switches you want. In this case I'm going to choose these two, and whatever you want to wire up. This lamp, for example. And then from the CADimage menu, you go to Electrical and Add Circuit Wiring. It will wire it up between the switches and whatever's done. You will get a curvy line to look like electrical. You can choose that to dashed, yellow, or there's even an option in there to have it wiggly, believe it or not. Smooth or wiggly. So we can set up however you like it. You'll notice here that the switches have updated. It knows that it's part of a two-way switch and the component is updated. It saves you from manually having to do this. And also I can go and drag any of these components if I redid the electrical set out, and the wiring will update accordingly. Now if you place 2D components, you can then go back and associate all of those to a wall plate. So if I select these two components that I placed, from the CADimage menu, I'll go back to Electrical and I'll add Wall Plate. And what that does, brings up our palette, and it looks at whatever components you currently have selected, which in my case is just two simple switches, and it gives you all the appropriate switches that could be part of that. So generally they're all from the different countries. I'm going to choose New Zealand, 2-gang, and click Create Plate. The components come down, they come to that nice simple view, and there's going to be a 3D plate here. So if I go into my 3D model, and I believe I placed it in this bedroom here. Let's just do walkthrough mode. There is my electrical plate. So it means when you do interior perspectives or interior elevations, you can start to see where your wall plates are going to be installed, because the customer can't move that later. It's really, really useful function. If you want, you can even go and turn the light switch on. Ultimate realism. So that's the electrical tool. There is a bunch of schedules provided with the tool for free. They're embedded into the template. So you have the component schedule, a fitting schedule, a legend. So I'll just show you this one here, for example, the fittings schedule. And it works out the zones, where the lights belong, how they look, their description, etc. So that my wall plates in the bedroom, this is my first floor, you get a full schedule, so you can give it to your client and tell them to go shopping, get the lights they want. There is legends there as well, so you can easily stick those on the plan and identify whatever you've placed on the plan. That's the electrical tool. It's available on the CADimage website. If you just go on and go to trials, you can download it from there, try it out for yourself. If you find you're spending way too much time doing electrical setouts, that might be the tool for you, and it could even save you some money. Okay, and last one we developed, which I'm only going to discuss, is called the BCF tool, and this is BIM collaboration format. this was designed to allow ArchiCAD to communicate with a checking software called Celebri. The idea is this software can look at your model, figure out if you meet code, company standards, and different requirements. And if there was a problem, the BCF tool allowed you to send a message back to ArchiCAD and say, this isn't right, please fix this clash or this error. But it's one that we just seen avoid and we've supported. If you want to know more about Celebri, please contact Tate. It's a very little cool piece of software. But there's 3 model viewers there, which is used for our IFC. Okay, lastly, we have the CADimage Support Center. So I was showing you the new ArchiCAD Help Center, and that's for all of ArchiCAD's functions. But the CADimage tools aren't included in this. So we went and updated our support website. So if you go to support, you can choose any tool, for example, electrical, which I've just shown you. And now this optimized page is just a lot easier to follow. So it goes from start to finish, so how to download and install, and then we've created these new getting started guides. And these are really simple follow-through guides that will take you through the most basic steps to give you a good outcome. So it just gets you up and running. After that, the knowledge base is there, of course, and we have the forums, which are frequently asked questions. Now, one of the things a lot of people asked for was PDF guides so that they could download it and print it rather than having to rely on the internet. So now you can download whatever section you like as PDF, keep it on your computer or print it. Just a useful little resource. Now the forum is been updated extensively and it's used by quite a lot of people. So it's separated into all the individual tools, and generally I would describe them as frequently asked questions. So if there's an issue that's happened before, you just go search for it in the forum and the answer may already be there. If it's not, of course, you can use the ticket system, get in contact with us, we'll of course answer your question, and if it should be on the forum, we'll put it up there. Now I'm going to hand it back to Mark, and we're just going to talk about the New Zealand template, on how it's set up and how ArchiCAD is designed to work. And that will do us. Thanks for your attention. Pass on to Mark.
Thanks, Jonny. So, yeah, page 85, New Zealand template. So quite often we get a call, and at the beginning of each version, I'm sure it's not as bad as I make it out, but it's like, why do you have a release every 12 months? It's so time consuming to upgrade our template. It's taking us 2 weeks to upgrade our template every year. Now, if it is taking you 2 weeks to upgrade your template, there's probably some issues that we need to talk through. So you probably want to give the support guys a call and we can talk through that. But one of the main reasons that it's sometimes can be clumsy upgrading a template from version to version is you are too far away from the standard New Zealand template. So what I want to do over the next 15-20 minutes is take you through some of the basic functions of the New Zealand template, and you can, and it might be, for some of you, it might be kind of a penny drop situation where you go, oh, I get it now. It would make much more sense to align ourselves a little bit more to the New Zealand template. So the first thing that I want to get into is pen sets. So let's have a quick look at how pen sets work. Right, so if I go to, where am I going? Document, here we go. So in ArchiCAD 17 and 16 and 15 and 14, we created a bunch of pen sets. Now all these pen sets have been based off the international template for ArchiCAD. So these, if we look at the pen sets down the bottom here, these first 140 pens up to this up and including the white line have been historically ArchiCAD's modeling pens. So when you place a modeled element or a default ArchiCAD element, it uses one of these pens. Now these pens are worked out in vertical rows. So we're looking here, pen number 1, general cut, structural, general cut, not. So these are all our general pens, and then we've got all our opening pens and all our object pens and annotation pens and walls and columns, slabs, beams, stairs, etc. So as you place an element from your toolbox, and it's a stair element or it's a roof element, in floor plan and section it uses one of these 7 pens. So if we take stairs, for example, you've got a general pen, which is 0.18, a cut structural pen, cut non-structural, and all the pen weights are changing, symbols and separators, outlines, cut fills, and background fills. Now each one of these modeled elements has the same structure, so the second row here is cut structural, cut structural, cut structural. Now that's the way ArchiCAD is designed to work from ArchiCAD 10 onwards. So whenever you place an element from the toolbox, it's designed to use one of these pens from the first 140. And they are scale specific. So at 1 to 50, for example, I'll start at the site one, the lowest scale. So at site, this stairs cut structural is 0.25. And at 1 to 100, it's 0.35. At 1 to 50, it's 0.5. And at detail, it's 0.7. So as you get into closer detail, the pen weights get darker, which is what we want. So that's how the pen set is designed to work. It's based on modeled elements. So when we place a wall or a beam or a slab, when we cut a section, it looks right. It uses the right pen weights. It uses the right fills, and all the fills have the right pen weights and all that kind of stuff. Now there are 4 scaled pen sets, and each one of those pen sets has a printing buddy. So the printing buddy is basically a black and white version, and you can see that I've left some things grey because I like my walls to have a grey fill. If you don't like your walls having a grey fill, then wall cut fills and walls outlines and wall symbols and separators, you can set those back to black. So a printing pen set is basically black and white, plus we've got some colour stuff down the bottom here if you're printing colour, and we've got a series of grayscale pens if you're printing grayscale. Now the biggest problem we have with customers is that, you know, I only use 8 pen weights, so they go and change the first 8 pens to their custom pen weights. Now this is something we used to do way back in ArchiCAD 9, but since ArchiCAD 10 it definitely hasn't been the case. So if you were to say, for example, change these to, you know, 0.1 and 0.13 and 0.15 and 2 and 3 and 4, and changing the weights of these, if you go and, the problem is then, if you go and place any window, now a window and a door places with pen number 3. That's a default pen for windows and doors. So if you go and place a door and you've modified this pen here, so it's not a 0.25, it could be a 0.5, then every time you place a window or a door, you're going to have to go back into that door or window and then change the pen weights. Now that may not be a problem if you're using CADimage, because you can set all the pen weights in the single CADimage door or window. But if you're using ArchiCAD doors and windows, there are 100 doors and windows. So you'd have to go through 100 doors and windows and modify their defaults. Now changing 100 doors and windows might take you a day or maybe 3 hours. But the next button is even more sinister. It's the general object button. Every time you place a blender or a car or a person or a tree or a rowing machine or a clock on the wall, like we did earlier, it places with pen number 3, which is by default at 1 to 50, is a 0.18. So if I have modified that to be my 0.5 or my 0.7 pen, every object I place, of which there are thousands and thousands of objects inside ArchiCAD, you would need to go and change them to a new default pen. Or you would go into the object tool and reset the defaults, which would be just a project that would take weeks. So if you were just to not do that, so not use these first 10 pens as your I know what scale they are pens, you would be saving yourself a lot of hassle going from version to version. If you want to know and to use a pen that is a certain scale, a certain pen weight, that's what we've created these pens here for, this row of pens here. These are non-scale sensitive pens. So if I change from 1 to 50 to site, this pen stays as 0.25. It's always a 0.25 no matter what pen set I use. So these pens here were the ones that we assumed would be being used for doing drafting lines. So if you want a 0.25 line on your site plan, use the orange pen. If you wanted a 0.25 line on your detail, use the orange pen. So these are the pens that we were suggesting, and they've always been down there. They're, well, somewhere down there. They were ones that we were suggesting you use if you want to do line work. What we've been seeing as we've been going around the country is these first 140 pens up here. The comments we've been getting is, oh, but I don't like the line weights. The line weights are too heavy or the line weights are too light. Feel free to change the weight of a pen. So 0.18, so you can just go in here and edit the weight of a pen because it might be too dark or too light or whatever. If you are doing that, remember to change it in the printing pen set as well, because that's the one we use on the output sheets. But if you are finding that the pen weights aren't right for you, can you? We would much appreciate it here at Graphisoft if you would tell us which ones you find the need to modify, because if we get consensus between customers, we will modify them and we will make it better. If you don't use our pen set because it always produces bad looking drawings, let's get our heads together and make sure that the New Zealand default pen set actually works for New Zealand customers. So I'm asking for a bit of help from you guys out there. If you can supply me with some information on if you are modifying it, what are you modifying it to, send it through to Graphisoft New Zealand and Mark at graphisoft.co.nz, and we will implement that into the next version of the template. So yeah, first 140 pens, model pens. Jonny talked about this next row of dual row of pens here. These are the brand new building material pens for ArchiCAD 17. This is the change between the 16 and 17 pen sets, the addition of these two extra lines, which unfortunately has meant all our New Zealand pens, these bottom 4 rows here, had to move down 2 rows, which is going to cause a lot of problems if you want to copy and paste a detail from version 16 to 17, because if you used these detailing pens in version 16, they were up at this row here. What we're working on at the moment with the CADimage developers is a pen mapping tool, which will allow you to map the old pen 141 to the new location 181, and 142 to 182, and 143 to 183. This pen mapping tool will be very helpful for other things as well, like those of you that use these first 8 pens here, because you'll be able to map this pen here. Pen number 1 can be mapped to pen 181, and pen number 2 can be mapped to pen 182. So for those of you that are doing things in a non-international standard ArchiCAD way, this pen mapping tool might be able to help you out. But carrying on here, I'll just tell you the highlights. So these are our pens, 0.1, 13, 18, 2, 3, 5, 5, 7, 1, 2, and 3. These are based on ISO 182, so we've aligned all the pens to ISO 182, and then we've got grayscale pens, which always print grayscale. We've got a revision pen, which we suggest you use for your revision clouds. If you use one of the printing pen sets and you've got a color printer, the revision information will print red. Then we've got a couple of twink pens, a thin pen and a thick pen. The idea of the twink pen is you've got a 3D line. You don't know where it came from. It's on the layout sheet. You know that if you delete it, it's going to delete some object somewhere. You're in a hurry. The boss is breathing down your neck. Just twink over it, get the drawings out, and come back and fix it later. Then we've got some color pens here. These pens here will print color if you've got a color printer. And then the last ones here are the renovation pens. Now for those of you that are using the renovation tool, these pens have dropped from this row here down to this row here. So starting a new project in ArchiCAD 17 and activating renovations won't cause any problems. Migrating a project from 16 to 17 that is using renovations, you'll have some funny pen issues. Once again, you'll need to use the CADimage pen mapping tool. Now that tool is due to be released shortly, so keep an eye on the blog for that. Now, if you are using the renovation tool, we haven't talked about any of the new features of the renovation tool. And in fact, we've only covered about 60% of the new features of ArchiCAD 17. If you do want to have a look at the rest of the new features in 17, go to that new support website that Jonny showed you for ArchiCAD and just type in new features, and there'll be a whole bunch of videos, PDFs, forum articles about the new features of version 17, and some of those things might help you out. But directly with regards to renovations, the renovation tool has given you more choices in how you visualize the different phases. So do you want to show fills or not? And one of the things that we haven't done, or that hasn't been done, is sections and elevation markers still don't have the ability to be assigned to a phase. So if you do have different elevation markers for existing and new, you'll have to still use layer manipulation for that. So sorry I went into renovations there for a second, but that's how our pen set works. So if you can take one thing away from my little discussion there, is please try not to modify these first pens, because they're very important ArchiCAD default pens. So that's the pen set. The next thing I want to just have a quick chat about, page 87, is the layers. Now, we tried to keep the layers and the layer sets as simple as possible. Basically, layers and layer combinations are designed around floor plans. Sections and elevations and details are what you see is what you get scenario. Although we do have layer combinations for them, most of the layer combinations here are all to do with your plan drawings. So what we've tried to do here is set these up so that the des layers with the prefix des relate to the design portion of the toolbox, and that's all your 3D stuff, 3D floors and furniture and lamps and rafters and all that kind of stuff. The doc layers down the bottom here is all your 2D stuff. So the doc stuff relates to the document portion of the toolbox, and that's all your lines and fills and arcs and text and keynotes and all that kind of stuff. And then we've assembled these into layer combinations. Now, the layer combinations were based on the view, so on the view map view. So if you had a layer combination of plan plumbing, or sorry, if you had an output sheet called plumbing, you have a view called plumbing. That view called plumbing has a layer combination attached to it called plumbing, and that has the right layers turned on and off. Now, if you've got your book in front of you, the last or second to last page there has a layer matrix. So in there, you've got layer combinations down the spine and layers across the top. So the idea is you look down the spine, find the type of 2D output you're trying to do, run your eye across the layers that are on and off. The ones that are black are on, the ones that are white are off. Now, if you do have it printed out, we have made an error in this document. Plan plumbing should have des walls turned on. So just color that in if you've got a pen handy. We'll probably print out some more of these and issue them correctly. So, but everything else is right. So the idea is, I'm doing a plumbing plan. You run your eye across there and go, okay, des fittings plumbing. That's the layer I need to put my plumbing fittings on. Floors show, walls show, and then right down the end there, the layer for all my 2D stuff is doc plumbing, and that should sort you out. Now, that's how it works. We tried to keep it as simple as possible. We do know that we once again need a bit of customer input. As I said, the layer combinations are based on the views that we believe we require. Now, we want to make a New Zealand template based heavily on 2-story residential. The commercial guys generally have their own workflows, so I can handle those guys slightly differently. But for residentially, we can all kind of be working from the same deck of cards. So we should be able to set up something pretty good for most residential customers. So once again, if you have some input and go, right, well, I need these extra views that you don't have. I need to make them every single time. It's a real pain in the bum. Tell me what they are, and we'll get the template guys to create a new template that has this new information in it. New views mean new layer combinations, which could mean new layers, which could mean new workflows. So we want to get all this stuff handled out quite well. So that's how layers work. So layers and layer combinations. As we work through the list here, I'm on page 89. Linked elements, new feature in ArchiCAD 17. All I've done there is said wall and columns are now linked to the story above. So if you change your floor-to-floor height, these things move with it. Floor plan display, basically there everything's set to home story only except for the stair tool, at which point you want the stair to show on the home story and one above. Design tool defaults, floor plan and settings there on page 89, so I've run through all those. Story settings, this is a relatively important one. If I open up the story settings of this project here, this is a standard 2-story residential project, but notice that there's 4 stories in here, and also notice that there are no negative stories. So when you start collaborating three-dimensionally using IFC, negative stories aren't necessarily able to be read with your collaboration software. So we tried to eliminate negative stories, and in fact this same story setting is the one we've used since version 10. So in a standard 2-story house, 0 is your sea level, and that's where you model your site mesh. 1 is your ground floor, 2 is your first floor, and 3 is your roof. One of the problems I have with the story settings dialog is this is one of the only dialogues in ArchiCAD that shows you what the actual attribute number is. It doesn't show it in layers or lines or fills or building materials. So just don't look at this list here of 0, 1, 2, 3 and think that that is any way related to the story you're trying to do things on. 0 is not ground floor. Okay, so if I could get rid of that row 0, 1, 2, 3, I jolly well would, because it's a bit confusing. If you're doing a house that's got a basement, 0 is your sea level, and that's once again where you model your site mesh. 1 is your first modeled floor, so it's your basement. So 1 is basement, 2 is ground floor, 3 is first floor, and 4 is roof. So think about how that works. If you're not collaborating three-dimensionally, it doesn't really matter, but eventually you will be as we move more and more to BIM. So that's how story settings are worked, and I've set that on page 90. At the bottom of page 90 there's a screenshot of the settings I've set the 3D window to. On page 91, for version 17, we've changed our default zone stamp to zone stamp 2, simply because this has scale-sensitive features. So at 1 to 200, it just shows the zone name. At 1 to 100 and 1 to 50, it shows the name, the number, and the area. And the zone stamp 2 has heaps of extra functionality in it. Next I want to talk about is favorites. Historically with the favorite tool, we just created one favorite for every single object, and that was kind of a restore default settings. So some of them still only have one. If I go to shell tool, there's only one there for the shell tool. There's only one for curtain wall, there's only one for morph. So the idea there is because remember, when you create something, when you go into a tool and you set all the settings in the dialog box here, if you click OK, when you go back into the tool, those are the settings that it will use. So if you go through the settings dialog here and you make a bit of a boo-boo so that when you place the object, it gives you errors in 3D or whatever it does wrong, if you go back into the object and place another one, you're still going to get those same errors because it's got the same default settings. So that's why I've created a favorite to restore the defaults, and it resets everything, gets the floor plan and display, gets the right pins, gets the right lines, gets everything right, and now it won't break in 3D, but of course you'll have to manipulate it again. So that's what we did for every tool. Since about version 12, we started adding a lot of extra composites into favorites. So you can see here now in the wall tool, and because we're trying to suggest that you use composites much more in version 17, we've added to this list as well. So you can see things like concrete 150, concrete block 200, stud 140 insulation plasterboard, stud 90 insulation plasterboard, stud 90 no insulation plasterboard, and stud 90 with no insulation, and no plasterboard. So we're trying to get you to think more about using composites. So set up a bunch of default ones in here. Column has the same thing. Oops, I turned off the favorites. But column has the same thing. Beam has the same thing. The cool thing about Beam, we're trying to leverage the Beam tool a lot more to do foundations. We found that the CADimage covering tool that had the foundation tool in it was becoming problematic. We dropped that in ArchiCAD 15 and 16. It's no longer provided now with ArchiCAD 17. But now with the introduction of building materials, we find that the coverings tool, for because it relies heavily on objects, and you can't apply building materials to objects, you would never be able to get the floor slab beam cleanup that we did in section CC if you use the CADimage covering, because you can't get building material priorities into objects. So we're using the beam tool here to do our foundations and our pod floors and our edge thickenings and stuff like that. Now once again, we may need some more, so we need some help from you guys. Which favorites would you like to see? And we can add those to the list. But as I said, favorites rely heavily on composites. We created a whole bunch of new composites in ArchiCAD 17. The composites had to be completely rebuilt because in 16 they worked on fills and in 17 they worked on building materials. So part and parcel of us making composites for version 17, we also had to make a whole bunch of new building materials because we work a bit differently in New Zealand to they do in Europe, which is the home of ArchiCAD, of course. A lot of extra timber stuff we had to make. We had to have building materials for timber joists and timber battens and timber roofs and timber walls, and so we've created a whole bunch of new building materials based on the new composites that we've created. Once again, we believe we've got the priorities right. If you find an error with any of the automatic priority cleanups, please tell us. And also, if we're missing any composites that you use on a regular basis, please tell us and we'll add them to version 18. If enough of you give me some input, we may make an interim template that's available in a couple of months' time. So composite structures, we added a whole bunch of those. Also complex profiles, we added a bunch of new ones of those. Basically all around here, all these slab ones, so slab foundations, footings, a bunch of thermal ones there, and some pod ones, and they're on page 93 if you're looking at your book. Now, the pod floor ones we could never have done without the priority cleanup that happens in ArchiCAD 17. If you do pod floors like X-bowl and rib raft currently, you must just go into your section and draw it all with lines and fills. But now we can model it accurately in version 17. So yep, they're all new. Once again, if we're missing some common beam situations, then tell us and we'll add them. Fill types, so I talked about that. Revision overrides, yep, talked about that as well. Basically the colors are the same, but they've been dropped down 2 rows. Operation profiles, Jonny talked about that. We created a residential New Zealand one because our buildings are bigger and have less people in them than they do in Europe, so you get more accurate dollar values on how much it costs to run. Filtering elements in 3D. Okay, schedules. Page 97. Graphisoft asked us if we wanted them to create a roof schedule, a roof construction schedule for us, and I kind of said, well, why would I do that? And they said, because doesn't everyone use the automatic rafter tool? And it was one that I knew about, but I had forgotten how powerful it is. I believe it was ArchiCAD 7 or 8 that this tool came out. You simply select the roof plane that you want to rafter up and come here to Roof Extras, Roof Maker, Roof Wizard, and it's the old-fashioned rafters, colletized ridge beams scenario. So you set up all the widths and sizes and purlins, trimmers, and click OK, and then based on the structure of your roof, it goes and places all the rafters for you. Now, I don't know whether you're familiar with that tool, but it's been there for a long time. And interestingly, there's also a truss maker in here. So if you get MyTech or whoever it is to design your trusses and get some DWGs from them, you can input them into ArchiCAD and you can trace over them with the truss maker, so you get your real trusses inside ArchiCAD. But the schedule that they've created for us here just allows us to schedule out those roof construction elements. So, oops, the scale's a bit big there. There you go. So, yeah, so 4 of these at this length and 6 of these at this length and 7. So, yeah, if we're starting to use ArchiCAD for scheduling, and obviously this is just standard rafters, but if they were rafters and collar ties and ridge beams, it would all itemize all that stuff. So very powerful stuff there. So if you forgot all about the roof tool, there it is. Jonny showed you the electrical component legends that we've added, all these different electrical component legends down the right-hand side here. Project indexes, this is a very, very powerful tool here, the view list. It's always been around, but for the documentation manager within your organization or for whoever's hitting the print button, this is incredibly powerful. What it does is it goes through your view map and lists all the views in your view map, and then gives you all the information about how the settings of that view go together. So you can quite quickly come here and look and see what's wrong. You've got these 4 here that are set to 1 to 100. Maybe they're accidentally set to 1 to 100. So you can change them in here to 1 to 50. Now, changes that you make in here get pushed back into the view map. I've got a bunch of customs here, which of course would never be allowed to leave the office. You're not allowed custom. So we would go, oh, actually it should be one of these layer combinations. So you can very easily sort that out much quicker than going to the view map, clicking on settings, checking it, clicking on the next one, click on settings, check it, click on the next one, click on settings and check it. So it's a very nice way here for our documentation managers to get their way around. Only a couple more things and then I'll let you go. I realize we've gone over time. But find and select criteria. I talked a little bit about find and select, and I know that some of us are using it, but one of the things that we always come up against in intro training is the ability to pick up CADimage boundary elements and the CADimage north when we're rotating our site. So what we did is we came up with a set of find and select criteria based on CADimage objects. So here they are sitting down here in my criteria sets. So if I choose the CADimage boundary and north, it simply looks and picks up all my boundary elements plus north. Then I would go to the mesh tool and select all my meshes, and then I would rotate it. So what we've done here is we've come up with some common searches that we thought you'd do, coverings and objects, and then individually roof coverings and wall coverings. It's always really difficult to pick up wall coverings. You shift click and sometimes you get the covering, sometimes you get the wall, sometimes you click on it again and deselect it. So now we've got this ability to do this here. And now if you don't know anything about criteria sets, you set up a bunch of criteria in here and then you just use the pull out and go store as. So it's very, very powerful stuff. And then lucky last there on page 99 is the view map, and we've added 5 new views to the view map. But as I said, really looking for your help at this stage. What views am I missing? Concentrating heavily on 2-story residential. Yeah, give us some feedback of what views are missing, and we'll simply add them to the next version. Anybody that provides information, we'll start a little round-trip ticket and start pushing information out. It's probably something we should be discovering at all the different user groups around the country. How do you want to make the template better? And really, the template is made for you, so who better to give us input on how it is created than you guys? So if you do have any input, if you want to send me through your template, or you want to send through your, probably better than a template would be a finished PLN with the finished set of documents, and then we can interrogate that as a group. Obviously, we're all confidential at Graphisoft New Zealand. We won't give out anything to anyone. But that is the end of the training. If there were any questions along the way, just type them into your question list there. If you want to ask any questions, just type them into the chat there, and I will keep that going for the next 15 minutes. So if you want to type it in, and what I'll do is I'll just create an email out to you all with the questions and answers. So thank you very much for your time. Hopefully ArchiCAD 17 will be the biggest, best and most powerful ArchiCAD you've used to date, and we look forward to your comments with regards to the template. Thank you very much for your time.